Hello again, friends! And you are our friends. I raised my chair up. I hope I sound okay. And welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here. Wherever it is that you are, wherever we are. Well, you know where we are. I'm in Last Manor, and he is in Castle Cornette, ready to answer your questions and talk about the week in wrestling, review some stuff, maybe some laughs. Who knows? I'm your host, the great Brian Last. And here he is, the star of the drive-thru, once a celebrity in the post office. Now they don't know who he is. Mr. Jim Cornette. I can't tell if that was the real thing or your little box.
Yeah, you've seen my box, haven't you? There's all kinds of weird, wild, wonderful things in my box, kids. Let me show them to you now. You know, that was probably, of all of the programs that we've done, where were we up to now, Brian? What number of the drive-thru is this?
Well, this is number 234 of the second iteration of the drive-thru.
The second incarnation or iteration. It's a reiteration of a previous
in a sense,
series that we have expanded upon and improved greatly. But there's a bunch of them. And that was probably the worst introduction you've ever done. And you've been on most of them.
I just lowered my chair a little bit.
And that's this chair business. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Legion of Last listening to Brian Last's program, and there may be a few Cult of Cornette members out there. Before we go on the air here today, Brian Last says to me, he said, do I sound all right? So what are you talking about? Do I sound normal? And I'm thinking, well, he's had some internet issues or connection problem, or he's trying out a new mic or what. I said, yeah, you sound like you always do. He's, well, I raised my chair up. What the fuck would that have to do with anything?
Because it changes where I am in relation to where the microphone is.
Well, you're still in the vicinity. Do you have a ruler that you keep right next to your jowl and to the microphone where you never deviate more than an inch or two away? I mean, is the microphone now across the room from where you've jacked your chair up, or
no,
are you
it's
still
not about that? No,
you're still in the immediate vicinity of the microphone.
Yes, it's about whether you want the microphone in front of you or if you want to hover above it. I wasn't really comfortable hovering above it. That's why I just lowered it down a little bit.
Well, now, is it sitting in front of you on a stand on the desk like it is me, or is it hanging from some radio station apparatus from above?
No, I kind of don't like those. No, it's on my desk. I have a little tripod here on my desk. Nice and easy.
Yeah. Well, in that case, then, even if you're above it, all you have to do is tilt the microphone up and it's still pointed towards your chicken lips. Did you ever think of that?
No, it doesn't really. The microphone, when you get the direction that it is good in, don't move it. Just keep it where it works well.
For God's sake, it's not. Again, you've got the OCD. But look, I'm over here. I'm 3 inches to the left.
How dare you accuse someone of OCD?
Right.
How dare you?
And now I'm up here about 3 inches higher than I usually am, and now I'm scrunched down here. Do I sound any fucking different? Is it really that big of a deal that you've got to worry your precious little head over it, Brian?
Can I ask you a question?
I wish you would.
If I say, hey, Jim, from here, and if I say, hey, Jim, from here, does it sound the same?
Well, no, because you're back in the parking lot.
But it's distance.
But you would never do that.
So now if I say, okay, well, let me try it again. I'll go up and down now. If I go right into the microphone.
Why don't you take your hand and go up and down? But see, I do a lot of moving around and a lot of gesticulating, and you never say, did you move your microphone?
Man, you do more. There's more banging coming from your end. I don't know what's going on over there.
Well,
there are sometimes like low key bangs.
I do this on the desk, and sometimes when I get verklempt, but usually I tell Jace that's not an edit. That's just consternation, frustration. But we were talking about masturbation. No, we were talking about you moving the microphone.
That's right.
You know what it is? I'm just cranky today because the time changed this past weekend, as you're well aware. And it's screwed up for the past, 5 months of this dark, bleak, desolate, cold winter. I've been established that I am waking up naturally at a certain time in the morning, right about when the sun's peeking over the horizon there. I get up about sunup out here on the farm, and then I'm going to sleep at about the same time, which is, it's obviously it's dark. It was getting dark at 5:30 in the afternoon a couple months ago. But now we just leaped ahead. And by the way, for the first day of spring, we still hadn't had all of the 3 inches of snow that we got melted off for the springing ahead. I know the first day of spring ain't till March 21st, but the springing ahead of the daylight savings time still had snow on the ground. And it screwed me up. I got up late today, and then I was rushing, and I was thinking I was ill prepared for what we were going to do. And then I realized that what we do requires absolutely no preparation. So therefore, then I calmed down a little bit. But I've lost my status at the post office that you mentioned at the top of the program when you were muttering and spitting about, trying to get out the words. I'm no longer a big deal at the post office. Because you know what? They've broken up that old gang of mine. The post office ninja, Brian, has been retired. It was a sad state of affairs when I went in there Saturday morning. Did I tell you about what you had to know? I told you about it because elsewise you wouldn't have known.
I guess I don't know what you're talking about. But if I had to know, I must have known.
Well, you must have known. You must have. Well, I guess you felt it. But I go at Saturday morning. I had one thing to mail, not an order. That's the Feather Bottoms business, and they're doing a great job. We'll talk about that later. But I had one personal item I wanted to mail, and I was going to check the post office box, and I go over there right when they open up at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. They're usually not too busy, and especially with the inclement weather. The wind chill was in the single digits, and we had 3 inches of snow, but that nothing unusual for me because I'm the post office ninja, by God. I've been in there through snow and sleet and driving rain. It weeds out the riffraff. Normal people don't go out in that weather, so just us professionals. So I pull in there about 5 minutes after 9 on Saturday morning, 2 cars in the parking lot. And I go right in the door, and there those 2 people are standing in line outside the lobby door, which is locked. I said, are they not open? And they've been there for a few minutes longer. The guy said, they can't find the key. The key to open the door to the lobby? How did they get in? I guess they came in the back. So a few minutes later, some woman that I've never seen before opened the door, had a kind of a surly expression, did not interact with me and the other 2 folks standing there, just kind of went about her business after she opened the door. I didn't even hear a fare thee well or a by your leave on the 7 minutes late opening the door because they couldn't find the key.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What did you want from her?
Well, I wanted something that I would get from my normal staff, all of the ones that have been run off from the place, like a, gosh, we're sorry, having a bad day, something like that. But I got that a minute later. Because we go in, and there is a guy who has worked there for years. He listens to the show sometimes. He's a fan, but he has never worked the front window before. I see him walking by, and we exchange pleasantries. And sometimes, as you know, I've been in there off hours when it's just me and the crew. But he's never worked the front window. He does a job in the back. But he says everybody but 3 people front, the window clerks and in the back, called in sick. Apparently because the weather made them sick. So they couldn't find the key to open the door because the person that's supposed to open the door wasn't there. And he's the only one who knew how to run the apparatus at the desks or at the front windows. So he had to do that because, as I mentioned, Lib, the old manager, transferred to another location, and they got a new manager. And then Breeze transferred. John, the hunchback, retired. There was another young lady there that was just a whirlwind of doing packages, and she left for maternity leave last year and apparently never came back. And it's a ghost town over there. And they lost my business just 2 months ago, and already it's a skeleton crew and people are leaving in droves. I hate that I've put them out like that, but I'm afraid they're going to lose their classification. They're going to be reduced to a drive-up mailbox here pretty soon without my business.
That's what happened to that photo, Matt.
I'm telling you,
you put them out of business.
Yeah, you can't lose Cornette's business, or elsewise bad things happen. But speaking of which, if you have done business with JimCornette.com, you're happy because the Feather Bottoms are doing a wonderful job. Not only are all the T-shirts and photos and Cult of Cornette membership certificates and DVDs and behind-the-curtain graphic novels flying out the doors to the customers, but, Brian, you know that normally the action figures just blow us up, right? And I'll admit that, it has in the past, it has been a challenge. However, we only put the Christmas variant, the last remaining Christmas variant action figures on sale last Saturday. And already, thanks to the Feather Bottoms greasing the wheels, I have signed over the first 100, and they are already delivered to the Feather Bottoms, who are printing out labels and are going to be going in the mail after a week. And more to come. We're moving like a conveyor belt now. So this has been wonderful. And their parole officer also says that this is going to look great on their records. All these people being happy with their service. So, if you would like to get one of there are less than 100 left now. We're still backed up because I've got to sign all these. It's going to take another few weeks, and you should have seen the convoy we had of SUVs taking all these figures over to the Feather Bottoms processing plant yesterday.
Convoy?
Filled up the expedition, filled up he's got one of those 1948 Studebaker pickup trucks.
Really?
But he's got a camper on the back of it, so it's covered in case of inclement weather. But that was filled up, taking him over to the processing plant to get the labels on. But everything is moving swimmingly, and as I said, there are less than 100 of the Christmas variant action figures. These will not be remade. When they're gone, they're gone. And I would say at this rate, you should get in the next 5 to 7 days. JimCornette.com. I love them Feather Bottoms. Oh, and speaking of other people I love and that are in love, real quick, happy wedding, Michael and Melissa. On March 25th, they're getting married in South Amboy, New Jersey. They sent me an invitation, but I can't be there, so I've told them you're going to be coming instead with 4 children, a wife, and a dog.
You know, I think I have a thing that day, but congratulations, Melissa and Mark. What was his name?
Michael and Melissa.
Michael and Melissa.
You better have a thing every day. If it comes and goes, I'd worry about you. That's St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church in South Amboy. If anybody wants to send flowers or gifts or go and get a free meal. There you've got that.
There are no free meals.
Well, you might have to sing for it. Did you tell me we've hit a milestone, or we're about to hit a milestone on the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel?
We're close to hitting a milestone. We haven't hit a milestone yet.
Well, thankfully, we've still got time to swerve to avoid it. But we're not to 300,000 subscribers yet. We're only at, 281, 282? I haven't checked the last few days.
282, I believe.
282. But we are also almost to 250 million views on the channel. I couldn't even say that without suffering succotash. 250 million views. That's that. Do we get a plaque or a cake?
No plaque. Cake is optional, and that's just in a few years. I think we're doing fairly well.
In a few years, I get my cake?
No, I was talking about the 250.
Oh, you mean in a few years we've got the 250 million views. How many years has that been?
A few.
It's only been like 3, right? Or 4?
3 or 4. That's why I'm saying a few, because I wasn't sure off the top of my head.
Oh, so I stumped you.
You stumped
what
me.
You're saying.
That's right. You win a cake.
Well, as long as it doesn't take a couple of years for it to get here, that'll be fine. So anyway, everybody jump on the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't. Start clicking on videos, because whoever is number 250 million, it wins a bonus, don't they, of something?
They win a cake.
How do we know? Can we tell who the exact 250 millionth viewer is?
I don't know. I mean, you really can't trust any of these people.
Well, no, I don't mean to take their word for it. I mean,
they could doctor any sort of image. We really couldn't trust anyone.
No, I'm talking about from our end. Don't we have control over this thing? We can go in the back end like Hotchkiss does with my state-of-the-art website, and he can just tell me the answer to any question instantly.
Well, we could certainly look into that, and we could find out who.
But is it that they all come in kind of at the same time, and it's hard to differentiate?
Well, because there's a churn rate that is certainly daily, and you could argue minute by minute where people subscribe, unsubscribe. We just happen to keep going
Churn?
up.
Wait a minute. What is this, a dairy? I'm not talking about butter.
No, but there are people who subscribe. There are people who unsubscribe. So you could be number 200. Well, it's views. It's not even subscribers. You're talking about a completely different thing.
No, I didn't say subscribers. I mentioned subscribers, that we are almost to 300,000 on those, but I'm talking about who is the 250 millionth viewer.
No, we can't figure that out. No, that's just out in the wind.
Well, why can't we?
That's like an impossible statistic.
No. Come on now. Actually, Net's.
Because then we have to track every single video across the entire network. We have to track every single video for, I don't know, a week in the range that we think it could hit. I don't
better get on that.
I don't know.
Sounds like it'll be time consuming.
I don't know.
I think NetSuite later in the program, I'm going to check that copy to see if they have anything about YouTube numbers, but they can do everything else with the internet these days. It seems like that we could program, or the people at YouTube could program it so whoever is the 250 millionth person to click on a video on our channel would immediately be, I don't know, electrocuted or outed as a spy but to the federal government, or his picture put up in the Times Square on one of those electronic billboards or something. Certainly there's some automatic thing that they could trigger that would, instant catapult them out of their desk chair into space. I don't know, just something.
Why are you looking to punish the person, though? It went from, actually, now that I think about it, it went from when the 250 millionth view happens, do I get a plaque? Do I get a cake? And how do I catapult the other person?
Someone else get thrown into space automatically? Well, these are questions you would have. Well, okay, then what about, all right, here you go. The 250 millionth viewing person hits the button and clicks on the video, and the sun shines and the skies open up. Hallelujah. And and then a parade comes down the street and presents Ed McMahon comes out of a coffin and presents them with their check from the fucking American publishing reader. What was that? The publishing company he that would give all the
because there was one. There's Publishers Clearinghouse, but he was
Publishers Clearinghouse.
Was he that one or the other one? There's a competitor to that.
Somebody was getting some money if Ed McMahon knocked on your door for about a 20-year period there, somebody was going to the bank.
But that's not what you're suggesting. You're suggesting zombie Ed McMahon gets out of a coffin. Is what you
well, he's dead. But instantly people would know if they saw Ed McMahon at their door, even if he was being propped up out of a box. If he's got a check in his jacket pocket, Publishers Clearinghouse, instead it would say official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. They would say, well, it's zombie Ed McMahon. I must have been the 250 millionth viewer.
Thank God he was in this parade, or I wouldn't have known he was coming.
It took forever to dig him up. At least he got double booked. He did the parade and this appearance.
All right.
I don't know. All right.
Well, check out the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel.
Thank you all. Thank all 250. Was it the same guy 250 million times, or was it 250 million different people?
See, that's one of the problems now that you say this. Someone could just sit at their computer and just click video watches over and over and over again, or have multiple monitors going and try to game the system.
All right. Well, if you want to see what happens, all your phones, your computers, your, what do they call them? The tablets.
Yeah.
All of those devices, get on official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and then just start clicking on videos on everything you got and just leave them running as long as you can and see what happens.
See,
and something might happen. If we can figure out a way to make something happen, something will happen. And then you'll probably need the services of one of our sponsors to get whatever happens off your computer.
And as a legal disclaimer, there's a chance nothing will happen.
There's a big chance that nothing's Well, our numbers would go up, so something would happen.
Something. Well, a lot of something's happened this week in the world of professional wrestling, and it is my show, and we have a lot to get through and a lot to talk about, a lot to review. So why don't we kick things off with something? And should we start with a review?
It's going to be one of those days.
It's one of those days, I think.
You just can't. Do I need to slap you?
You know, we have so many serious issues, and then there's so many, like, stupid issues. It's like the regular week in wrestling, the serious and the stupid. Would you like to start with serious or stupid?
Let's start with stupid, since we're in. I don't think we need to do the fucking transfer to the dead dog dedication from Casey Kasem or whatever. So let's keep going in the vein of stupid.
Well, in the vein of stupid, let's talk about WWE Smackdown.
Oh boy. Well, let's talk about it.
Oh, okay. I thought "oh boy" was a precursor to your next thought.
No, I was just "oh boy." You had to pick that one to start. But are you going to ask me a specific question? Do we launch right into it, or?
Well, I hope we don't launch right into the whole thing because there was a whole lot of Smackdown.
Well, I didn't see a lot of Smackdown. I hit the high points.
Well, I guess one of the high points was early on the debut of a new character.
All right. Apparently, Vince strikes again. This must have come from a movie that Vince saw about 20 or 30 years ago. But Seamus and Ridge Holland have just introduced their new cohort in their group, who's their old friend Butch, who is Pete Dunne. And they have dressed him up in an outfit that makes him look like a street urchin in a Dickens novel about to ask for more gruel. And did I mention his name was Butch? And people on the internet, they found there was a guy named Butch in the Little Rascals. And I truthfully, I think they're going more for a Dickens thing than. But
looks like Jackie Earl Haley.
Or what was it? Oh, Jesus Christ. What was the little kid that starred in Oliver in 1968? What was his name?
Consider yourself.
Yes. Consider yourself part of the family.
You know, it's funny. My thought when I first saw Butch come out there, before I even saw him, when I just saw Ridge and Sheamus, and I don't remember Sheamus doing promos like this, and maybe I just don't remember his old promos well. My thought was, oh, Vince must have thought of Oliver recently. Because that's in the range of where he would have seen a movie. Right? 1969, he would have seen a movie.
Yes. And that would have been about the last time that any of this shit made the big screen until Butch. And the kid was cute for about 3 years. He did a variety of movies.
Jack Wilde.
There you go. He was a cute
He was from HR Puffin stuff.
Well, and that's what led to the downfall of his career, puffing that stuff.
Well, you're not lying, actually.
Anyway, so we're laughing at this is good. Don't worry, folks. We're laughing now. It's going to have a tragic end. But apparently, Ridge Holland is the guy that we saw when we first started watching NXT, like almost 2 years ago. It may have been during the pandemic. I think it was the empty arena era. He's a big, jacked up bodybuilder guy. He's strong as a bull, obviously. And he caught a guy on a crossbody coming over the top rope. He's standing on the floor, and it just demolished his leg. And he just went down in a heap screaming, and they carted him off, and he was out for a fucking year or whatever. And now he's back. And Sheamus and Holland are wrestling Kofi and Big E the New Day. I guess, the other kid who used to be Consequences Creed in
Xavier Woods.
Xavier Cugat. That's right. He's Charo's husband. I guess he's injured because we never see him anymore. But anyway, they're having a tag team match, and this was just a regular TV match, and it was a modern match. They all just took turns doing stuff to each other. There's nominally a baby face and a heel, but they wrestle the same way. There's not really, you don't shine the baby faces at start and get some heat and have some tag team moves. You just trade places doing shit back and forth to people. And they went to a break, and I guess they got some heat on Big E in the break because as soon as they came back, he hit a belly-to-belly overhead throw in the ring. And then they made the simultaneous cold tags, and here come the new guys to start over again. And Kofi made a comeback that Sheamus took one bump for, and they got into a four-way. And Big E shit-canned Ridge Holland out on the floor and charged for the dealy day where he does the spear through the ropes on the guy to the floor, but Holland moved, so then Big E just flies through the ropes and takes a hard bump to the floor there. And then Holland goes up and just traps him and gives him a belly-to-belly overhead throw on the floor. And he didn't turn him. He just didn't turn him. He got him up off the ground, and then you could see he arched his back and just took Big E straight over head first over the top of him. It wasn't like it actually wasn't a back arch. It was he arched his calves and the back of his knees, and Holland was just kind of going flat down. And I don't care how strong you are, as Taz said somewhere here lately, it's not strength, it's technique. And I mean, I don't know why you would try to do a move like that to a guy that not only Big E is not only bulky and heavy, but he's short and squat and wide. I don't mean short like he's 5'2", but I mean, for that amount of weight, he's not a tall man. It's like trying to suplex a refrigerator. And yes, they did it in the ring. You know, the ring has a little more spring to it. But the more important question is why in a television match, again, that nobody's going to remember, and I think we said the same thing about Ridge Holland's injury, a television match that nobody's going to remember next week because they see so many of them, the guys don't stop and think anymore. And if that move was run by an agent, maybe the agents don't stop and think anymore. I would have a hard time thinking that those guys said beforehand to an agent that's in charge of their match, yeah, and then I'll grab him and give him a belly-to-belly overhead throw on the floor. And one of the agents didn't press the pause button. And so, what? Because why would you do that? And I'm sure that they were both going along with it. It's not like the guy just went into business for himself, and you could see Big E was trying to take it. But you can't do that on your own. And the whole thing is, okay, Brian, I was in charge of the WWE's lead developmental program for 6 years, correct?
Correct. Between
23 and 16 and a half years ago or thereabouts. And I wouldn't stake my life on it because there may be some distant memory that I just don't remember it being brought up, but I will stake my livelihood, life, and reputation, and etc., that it didn't happen twice in 6 years that two guys came up to me with the idea to give somebody a belly-to-belly overhead suplex on the floor in a match. And that encompasses guys just into wrestling school, guys with a little bit of experience, WWE contracted talent, veterans that would come in and assist, with training or be on our shows or whatever. I don't remember one time anybody, but I definitely know it didn't happen twice, suggesting that as a thing to do. And if there was going to be something like that done, that's why I'm saying the guys have lost sight of what they're doing, and they just get so numb themselves, like the viewers get numb to seeing this. The guys get numb to calling it and to doing it. And I remember in OVW, generally the person that would run stuff by me that I would have to nip in the bud for a positive reason was Flash Flanagan. Because Flash, he jumped off the balcony in Puerto Rico, almost killed himself, take a bump. He didn't come up with shit that was dangerous for other people, but he'd come up with shit that was dangerous for himself. And several times I'd, no, we don't need to do that, blah, 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 whatever. But he was a guy that wanted to, create the moments and also, but we applied it to the finishes of the matches or to angles, not just moves in the matches that people weren't going to remember. And there was a outsized risk involved. And an outsized chance that something could go wrong, and it was not even that important a part of the match. A bump like that, again in the territory days, but also in the WWF, in the 90s even, in other companies more recently, that's the kind of thing that a booker would go to top guys because he would see a guy do something in the ring, and maybe he'd get an idea. And you would, if you were the booker, you would go to guys and say, hey, do you think you could do this? Maybe let's go out and try to walk through that. Or do you think you could take this bump? Or could you guys together do this and pull this off? Blah, blah, blah. If it's something dangerous, you come up with a way to figure it into the finish or to figure it into an angle where it's not wasted, where everybody's confident that they can do it going in and pull it off safely, and where it will register because it looks like a big deal if you make it one. So bumps like that, yes, a lot of times guys came up with shit, but they would run it by whoever the booker was, or whoever the agent or producer or whatever you want to call the authority figure. And or a booker would come up with something and go to guys and see if they could fucking pull it off, but it was because it was an important part of the fucking program, not just a move in a match. But they've lost the plot, as they say over and across the pond. All the guys, a lot of the agents have lost sight because they've seen so much. Now they don't even think anything about it. I bet they could have run that through. Okay, then he'll take the bump to the floor, and then Ridge will go over and boom, grab him belly to belly, overhead, boom, and then Kofi will climb to that. They just walk right by it, run right over it. Just goes past them. But if they were thinking about it as we used to, and sometimes anything can go by one person, but everybody would be thinking about the match in days gone by as a match, and what you were saying was going to look like and materialize, and how do we do that, et cetera, and whether it was called for. It wasn't just, we're going to call this move and that move. They've watched video games for 20 years. Nobody sells shit in the video games. It's amazing. They pop right back up, especially when you start the game over again. Nobody gets a broken neck. I guess we haven't mentioned yet. Everybody knows already. It's on all the news, but that's what Big E got, was a broken neck. They're not going to have or to perform surgery on him, thankfully enough. But he's got 2 broken vertebrae. They just didn't go out of place. But apparently the C1, which I saw a quote from a orthopedic or some type of doctor on the internet concerning that it's a question now whether he'll ever wrestle again, because the C1 does not always heal properly or completely or whatever. But the point is, everybody's just going past that. We used to, if a guy was willing to take a bump like that, as I said, we used to make it an angle, make it a finish, make it a moment, make money out of it, and once in a blue moon, you see this guy do that. You usually, guys that we've talked about, had those trademark bumps that nobody else took, that were just wild and looked like they were out of control, because that guy was the one that had the key of how to do it. You saw it once every blue moon. He did it in different territories, or you didn't do it on TV. You did it in the houses, so you could do it in front of the house show people that paid, but it'd be brand new to them because it hadn't been on TV or whatever. Lawler used to do the Georgia the Jungle bump off the edge of the stage, face first into the concrete wall at the Louisville Gardens, once about every 2.5, 3 years. It was fucking outrageous, and nobody else going to do anything like that. They couldn't. It was one of his things. But now everybody's just throwing in these moves willy-nilly without not only considering whether they're risky to them physically, but also that's why the matches, they all look so out of place, because they can't sell the fact that they just took a full backdrop over the top to the floor, concrete floor, because they got to get back up and catch somebody. And that's what a lot of those dives that miss their target and just end up, the guy just dives over the top rope, flips in the air, and lands splat on the goddamn floor outside because the guy missed him, or he went over his head or whatever. And he's on his feet in 10 or 15 seconds to catch the guy or do the next move. 40 years ago, if Dusty Rhodes could have found somebody that could take willingly and without killing himself, run and dive over the top rope and flip and take a flat back bump on the goddamn floor on purpose, he would have made him $1 million. Because he'd have made it an angle and a finish and a hospitalization and a return for revenge and whatever the fuck else. And people would have shit themselves for 10 years watching the replay. Now it happens 3 times a segment. So anyway, the match ended right after that when good old Butch distracted Kofi and he got kicked and beat. But Big E now is, and then Butch got in and was able to get some heat at. Now he was the bruiserweight, and he was this tough guy that kicked everybody's ass. And now he's the little punk kid that has a mental issue. And when the big guys get the opponent down, then he gets on them and beats them up. And it looked like one of the little rascals fighting over milk money. But meanwhile, Big E's out on the floor with the doctors, and they're about to stretcher him out. So, I mean, everybody loves this guy, and everybody works with him. I've never met him, don't wish him ill. And it wasn't his fault, except for, if I'd have been him, I would have said, I don't think I'm going to take that. And let's come up with something else. But apart from that, he bears no responsibility. And the other guy is just green and, don't do shit you don't know how to do. But he didn't do it maliciously, and I'm sure he feels horrible. But again, goddamn it, just everybody think about what you're fucking doing, and nobody remembers it. Nobody remembers it after the fucking show's over because they've seen 13 other things that looked like they should have hospitalized somebody too, because we've gone too fucking far, which is what I've been saying for the last 20 years was going to take place. How do you top it? And now it's you've got the guys who are strong enough personalities that they can actually work and people are interested. But for most of the guys, either through lack of personality or rotten booking, the fans are not interested in the wrestlers anymore. They're interested in the car wreck. They don't want to see the race car go out and turn left for 500 miles. They want to see it fucking turn right into the wall. Maybe take some spectators out with it. And then everybody gets all fucking concerned and fired up about, oh gosh, it's horrible, the pain and suffering that this wrestler or that wrestler went through. And they're the same ones that go, well, all they did was wrestle and the guy body slammed the other guy. Nobody did any flips. Nobody did any dives. Nobody went through any furniture. Well, fuck, there's been a reason for 100 years why nobody did that shit. Because you end up in the hospital or paralyzed or in surgery. They've just figured this out the last 10 or 15 years. I hate to be a one to dominate the conversation, but those are my thoughts.
There's not too much for me to add to that. Obviously, you have an expertise here that I can't add to this. It's a horrible injury. Horrible to see. Won't be surprised when we hear that because of the shape he's in and helped him. And maybe, helped him stay alive.
Well, yeah. I mean, the average person taking that bump straight on top of their head, they were done.
Yeah.
And the doctors have said this guy was lucky, but if he didn't have a neck like a fucking maple tree, it would have been over with. And it can happen at any time. And I know some of the AEW fans are going to say, well, that's good. There are at least 10 incidents on every AEW television show where something looks like it would have hurt some son of a bitch more than even this. He landed right on his head, but I mean, theirs are even more ridiculous. The Guevara doing the double cannonball off the top from 20 feet through the table flat onto the concrete floor. That he should have been paralyzed.
I can't watch Misawa matches anymore. And I used to love Misawa because I know how it ends.
Yeah.
And every match is leading to the ending. And I hope Big E gets better. By all accounts, a really nice guy. And like you said, the big, I don't want to say complaint, I don't know how you phrase it, but the big issue I had was why you're doing this. When you really stop and break it down, you realize how far we've gotten, because it's just like, oh yeah, of course they were doing that. But then it's like, why are you doing a belly-to-belly overhead suplex on the floor
to a 300-pound man
on the opening match on Smackdown?
Yeah. That's what it's come to be expected. And then all the guys are trying to top themselves. And like I said, you got Sammy Guevara, good talent, great talent, fine young man, personality, blah, 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 athletic. He's going to fucking kill himself. And he gets over without doing that shit because he's still got, as a heel, we mentioned the slappable face, or as a baby face, a nice grin. And he's athletic and he's young, so you naturally want to root for the guy anyway. He does. And even if, I guess what I'm trying to say is the same, it's the Young Bucks principle, though, or it's any of these other, the trampoline cowboys. Just because you can do something and just because it gets you over doesn't mean you should be allowed to for the good of the general welfare of the rest of the business. Because if a 190-pound guy, am I being generous to Sammy, can fall at a high rate of speed from 20 feet in the air, flat of his back through a table onto the concrete floor and get up and continue the match, then what do you have to do to the 250-pound world champion or the fucking legendary icon or whatever that you got to run over him with a steamship? or bring out Sting's flamethrower. It doesn't make sense. And it hurts the overall product and everybody in it. Because some guys that would draw more money because they are personalities and they are star level workers and performers, but they're not going to be taking bumps like that, nor should they. When you try to do an angle with them, everybody goes, well, that couldn't have hurt him too bad because look what happened to Sammy and he got right back up. Even if they're not analyzing that deeply on the surface, I talk a lot about subliminal images and the subliminal impressions and just the ones that are made over and over. That's how musicians get over as rock stars. That's how actors get over as movie stars. They make enough impressions, whether on the surface or subliminal, in a positive manner that you get interested and you get involved, you want to see more. The only subliminal message that we get from most wrestling today is it's a live action video game and nobody's really getting hurt except they're all really getting hurt. And I don't know how difficult that is to understand. When you tell everybody that everything's bullshit, it's all set up ahead of time, we're all fucking bosom buddies and lifelong friends, and we're just glad to be here, and we're cooperating with each other to put a show on for our fans. But meanwhile, we're doing stupid shit that's unrealistic and would never happen in a million years that you would ever be able to get up from, but we're really hurting each other while we're doing it. But at the same time, you know it's entertainment, so we're going to wink at you while we break our bodies down and put ourselves in early wheelchairs. I can't figure this shit out. I cannot follow that train of logic. So anyway, as I said, I've been in a lot of, not just OVW, Ring of Honor training seminars, wrestling school workout sessions of all kinds. And yes, you do get guys up and obviously it's not been over the last 5, 6, 7 years when this has really taken off. It was always there, but it's really taken off. But even 10 years ago, when you got any kind of talented wrestling school student in any kind of competent school, they could kind of get the picture of don't do something that not only should kill somebody and they pop right back up, but continue to do it because it makes everybody look bad afterwards, and then it makes everybody's job harder. The same thing as kayfabing. If you told guys in OVW it worked just fine, except when I didn't get backup from the WWF office, if you tell guys that this is a magic show and we don't reveal our secrets, they get the message. But nobody bothers to tell them that now because they think, well, everybody's smart, so we'll just spill our fucking guts. Name, rank, and serial number. Okay, so they know, so tell them what the main thing that they already know, but you don't have to give them all the details.
It's not what it is or isn't, it's how you treat it.
Yes. And I love the fact that people are, wow, Cornette exposes the business all the time, tells us exactly how, well, yeah, everybody else is. They just don't understand how the fuck to do it to begin with, so at least I'm telling you the right story. And I'm not in the wrestling business anymore, and I don't give a shit because they fucked it all up. But you can still follow some basic rules of the road, and everybody won't end up in an iron lung, as Chief Jay Strongbow would say. So I hope he gets better. I hope he comes back to wrestling. I hope he doesn't take any more belly-to-belly overhead suplexes. But it's not like this is the last time this is going to fucking happen. I'm surprised it doesn't more often. And it's not necessary.
No one got hurt, so you look past it. But to your point, earlier in the match, I mean, a minute before that, whatever, Kofi Kingston did a short dive, off the apron, did a flip onto whoever on the floor. All but missed him, all but landed on the floor, barely touching the guy. Thankfully, no one got hurt. But that happens all the time. We see people do flips where they hit no one. What's the point?
Well, but it's actually, in some cases, might be worse, depending on, as Ridge Holland can vouch for, if you're the guy catching rather than the guy diving. Because now you've got 200 and something pounds from a height at a high rate of speed coming at you that you've got to somehow break the fall of without breaking yourself in the process. And at the speed they're coming, and now they're doing flips and fucking pirouettes in the air. They look like fucking Flipper the Magic Dolphin. You got elbows, you got feet, heels, boot heels coming at you, knees, heads. What hard part's going to hit me? I better turn my head. Well, if I turn my head, I can't see who's coming. Maybe that's why they're missing everybody. They don't want to get plastered in the face. It's goddamn foolish. It's overdone. Everybody does a dive. And I attended, wait a minute. Let me do some quick math in my head. When I was a fan, when I was a photographer, I attended in some years between 150 and 200 live events. And I would say during the course of that time, 4, 5, 6 times, especially if Bill Dundee was motivated and had a real good opponent, you would see somebody dive through the ropes. That's it. Because what the fuck? It wasn't Mexico and it wasn't Japan. And there's a high risk of flying into the front row and hurting yourself or getting sued. So why do it? But now, and that's why it got over when people started doing it, go, wow. And now it's like, oh, God, this again? And so they got to spin, or they got a corkscrew, or they got a backflip, or they got whatever the fuck. And at this point, it's goddamn, it's a diving competition. I'm talking about in an actual pool. What they ought to do was scratch the ring and just bring in a swimming pool and 2 diving boards at each end and have a diving competition. And at least they could land in the water and they wouldn't fucking paralyze themselves.
Even that hurts. When I was a kid, that's all we did was the Superfly splash and the Macho Man elbow into the pool. It always hurt. It's like doing a belly flop.
Yeah.
It hurts.
So that, I mean, that's at this point, even if again, everybody, oh, you're just behind the times, just do something different since we've seen it. Figure out something else to do that looks like it hurts somebody, but doesn't. That's kind of the idea of this business. Instead of doing shit, let's see how many risks we can take because we're all a bunch of fucking morons. And you know what? Part of the thing is, obviously, they get paid. They get paid their contract money. Guys on contract now, they get paid whether they're hurt or not. If you hurt yourself, especially if it was your own fucking fault. In the old days, you were on your own. That's why you didn't hurt yourself. Except if you couldn't help it. Shit happens, but not that often. And now everybody, well, okay, so now here's the thing. Even if you get hurt and you still get paid, you're still hurt. And that's painful. And you got to go through all that shit to fix whatever it is. And then by the time you get back, you might have lost your spot and it cost you money in the long run. So here's the idea is don't get hurt. Don't hurt nobody else. I don't know what more. I mean, they're not going to listen anyway. But that's everything that we say comes to pass because you know it's going to, because you've seen the fucking, as you said, you saw the Misawa movie. You know how it comes out. And it's not like, yes, Mick Foley is still ambulatory. Bless him and thank goodness. Everybody said he'd be in a wheelchair by this point, but he's still gone through a lot of pain and inflammation, as Dusty would say, and he's a freak physical case. I don't, it part of the fun of wrestling, at least for me, for a number of people involved in it, was getting to go out and get to people emotionally. And to either cheer you or boo you, to buy tickets to see you, to have that feedback from the live crowd, to tear the house down, blah, blah, blah. You tried to put as much into the moves you did or the things you did physically as you could to elicit those responses and to accomplish all those things, make the big check and have the great match and draw the big crowd and be in the main event and all that stuff. But thinking of Midnight Express tag team moves, that was a byproduct of, okay, how are we going to have a good match and how are we going to tear the house down? How are we going to be in the main event and make money? It wasn't, wow, we could do this move. It was, we could do this on TV as a finish, or we could do this in an angle to further this thing. It was a component, not the goddamn thing we were thinking about. And Bobby Eaton took a bunch of he'd take the hip toss on the floor and the backdrop on the floor. That's because nobody else was doing it, and he could, for whatever reason, and get up afterwards. But it wasn't like constantly, and he didn't do all those things in every match. It was broken out during the big angle or the big fucking whatever. And still he had physical problems with his hip and his knees and his back and everything else. But the idea that it should just be these holy shit moments alone without all the other context around it is why that everybody just cheers and pops when they see this happen, and then nobody remembers anything afterwards. And you'd have to keep a written list of who did dives just on last week's Dynamite. It's not like, wow, the Superfly splash. It's like, oh, there was a dive, and there's a dive, and this guy did dive, and that guy did the dive. And do we have the list of divers? It's so you want to paralyze yourself or somebody else for that, go ahead. I'll be over here. I'm done.
Well, beyond the Big E injury and the match with the New Day and the Vince's British Dream, I don't know what this other team is. Did you see any of other? Any of other?
Did
you ruin the English language? Did you
yes.
see any of the other clips on SmackDown?
I was studying English and being a cunning linguist. Speaking of people who have a tenuous grasp of the English language, Brock Lesnar. No, they did a really nice, did you see at the top of the program, a nice package on the Reigns and Brock Madison Square Garden angle.
Yeah,
and it was better than Raw's. They edited it differently. They didn't do all those freeze frames that kind of aggravated you. They made the bumps seem more vicious. There were way too many chair shots, even in that, even for Brock. If there's one guy I'd believe you could hit with a chair 7 or 8 times and get back up, it's Brock Lesnar. But still. But I guess they had to make it different for the two different networks, but SmackDown won that competition, the package competition. SmackDown takes it. But the Brock in-ring interview that started the show, he's better by himself verbally on the microphone than I thought he would be, but they did the pretty smart thing here. He got it out. It was short and sweet, got it over with, calls Roman Reigns out and starts yelling for blood. Because Brock Lesnar, speaking like a normal person, it doesn't do his aura that many favors. So when he gets to the violence and the screaming, I want your blood, that's the way to portray Brock. And he got it. Blood for blood. And then here comes Heyman to take the temperature down. Yes, that's the Paul's presence can always calm people when emotions are getting heated. Heyman walks in the room instantly. It's like Mother Teresa walked in.
Even when he's the one who pissed you off in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's had 30 years of experience calming people down that were pissed at him. But he said, Roman Reigns isn't here tonight for your protection and blah, blah, blah. They're building WrestleMania. And really, after that package, they just needed this little bit of, this was just to juice it up a little bit. Nothing needed to happen. But Brock says, well, who's going to protect you? And then Paul gets the look on his face, and he turned around. I don't know that I've ever seen anything before that could be described as a high-speed waddle. Did you love that? And Paul's so good, But also, Paul is so unathletic, and I've known both of those things to be true for 30 years that I'm not sure whether he was working that run or that's the way he runs. God damn, it was great. Okay, he goes straight out back to the car and jumps in the car, and Brock runs through, beats up some security guys, and chases him out the back door. And it looked like one of those fucking the Blair Witch videos on the way out. They made it, which was good. It was not planned. They had one camera follow as far as it could, and it was out of focus and everything. I liked it.
It is an interesting dichotomy that when AEW put their world title on Adam Page, their cowboy character, all of a sudden Brock Lesnar is wearing the cowboy hat, and he's their champion over here on this show. It is an interesting comparison between the two.
Well, and also he lives out there in Saskatchewan with all the cattle, and Paige lives in Virginia with all the lovers. Yeah, Brock Lesnar looks like he would. Adam Page looks like one of Brock Lesnar's sperms. It's the only way to really describe that. It's like, what do they have those memes where they go, this is what you ordered on online and this is what you got. If you're talking fucking cowboy, and now we'll talk about this here in a second. Now that Steve Austin's back around, I'm sorry. God damn it. You stand Brock Lesnar next to Steve Austin, next to Adam Page and the Hardley Boys, and say, okay, here's the two fucking groups of stars in the two different wrestling promotions. It's fucking comical. Speaking of which, I mean, Brock's promo may have been comical to some. Or in fact, if we were talking about what you were just talking about, it was comical to compare some of the slighter wrestlers with some of the big heavyweight stars. But perhaps if you are a wrestler, no matter what you do, you can't get past 185 pounds. No matter what you do, and you're not happy about it, because you can't be Brock Lesnar, maybe you need someone to talk to. You know what? I'll tell you, and that was going around in circles, and I was trying to think, now how the fuck is he going to bring this back around to pertain to anything? But you did it.
Thank you.
You did it just barely. Folks, if you need somebody to talk to about, I don't know, maybe bounce some things off of them, like, do you need a new podcast host? Somebody who does better commercial transitions?
Hey.
If you want to just chew the fat and go over things with somebody, the folks at BetterHelp can assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. In all seriousness, folks, if something is interfering with your happiness, preventing you from achieving your goals, we hear from a lot of the Cult of Cornette members here that they listen to the podcast to help them feel better when they've got things on their minds, family members seriously ill or things going wrong through the pandemic, whatever. Well, we're talking Adam to make them feel better by entertaining them, but somebody can talk to you about those specific issues. With BetterHelp, it's professional therapy done securely online with a broad range of expertise, and the service is available worldwide. You can log into your account anytime, send messages to your therapist. You can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, no waiting rooms, and it's more affordable than the traditional offline therapy. And financial aid is available because BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. So you can go to the website, read the testimonials. We've read some of them that have been sent to us here on the program. And go to BetterHelp.com. That's better, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/JCE, and get 10% off your first month's services. BetterHelp.com/JCE. Join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. I wish I had an experienced professional co-host, but instead, I'll just call BetterHelp. 10% off your first month, BetterHelp.com/JCE. Well, before we slash Smackdown, I believe there was some other stuff on the show. Did you see anything with Charlotte and Ronda Rousey? Well, I did. Yeah, I did, Lance. I got to say one thing, though, before we get there. I mentioned Steve Austin, and this won't be it's not a long, drawn-out review, but Jesus Christ. Did you get goosebumps They go to the video. I mean, we've talked about that this reason that Owens has just decided that he hated the city of Dallas in the last 6 weeks. It was about as bland a reason to get Steve Austin back on the program as one could possibly come up with. But having said that, is there any bad reason to get Stone Cold Steve Austin back on the program? They have the video, the drone shot. He's coming in his fucking Jeep down the Texas, prairie, whatever the fuck. He comes to a stop. He gets out. He looks like Steve Austin. He's dressed like Steve Austin. He talks like Steve Austin. And it's short, serious, and stone cold. I'm coming, whether it's a fight or a match or a brawl or a KO show or whatever it is. I'm a one last can of whoop ass. I'm going to open, and right there it is, the last stampede. I'm not in shape for a long time. We just talked about this on the Experience Friday. It's Bill Watts from 40 years ago, and it's any other major star that ever came back after an absence out of retirement from years and years before that, before there was television. I'm not in shape for a long campaign, but one time I'm going to come back and blah, blah, blah. It's whether it's one last can of whoop ass or the last stampede or the last tangle in Tampa or whatever the fuck. This is wrestling. That's a star. And all he had to do was fucking speak. And he sounds like he means it. And he's goddamn got a fucking voice that matches his look. And then the rest of the show, we came, for a second there, it was 20 years ago. And things were a lot better in the wrestling business. And then we come back to the present. And then we come to Ronda Welcome Wagon Rousey. I think next week she needs to come out with fucking little Reese cups that she throws to the kiddies and lollipops for the girls. She's smiling, she's shaking hands, she's kissing babies. She's such a happy little thing. She's the chairwoman of the Welcome Wagon. The baddest woman on the planet. Because Vince wants her to smile. Brian, I don't mean to pick apart everything in the world, but I'm going to here. Should Ronda Rousey be left standing alone in the middle of the ring with a microphone with nobody there as a life raft, a life preserver, a prompter, somebody to bounce something off of, a little prod every once in a while? She was out there. She had material that had been written for her. I'm sure she'd gone over it, but she delivers it with very little emotion in perfunctory, short, staccato little bursts of like as if to get it over with. And the inflection on the last of the sentence sounds the same as the first of the sentence. Did I just kind of describe that properly?
Yeah, and we just saw her, I don't know, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago in the ring do a promo, and we had the similar thought, which is, why is she in there doing this? This is not good. The scripted stuff, whatever it is, it doesn't feel right. I don't even know how to describe her babyface persona. It's like she's almost like begging the fans to like her.
Well, she had the timid look and the dodgy eyes, the darty eyes back and forth a little bit. And she wasn't putting oomph in it because I think we've established that mentally she will second guess herself. She destructed somewhat when she lost the UFC fights. And then she got all frazzled when the fans didn't like her the last time when she left. I'm wondering, is it that she thinks if she goes out there and puts everything into it, that people will shit on it? And so she's just doing it like that because she doesn't want to be over the top. I don't know what. She doesn't look comfortable. If there was somebody there in the ring, Michael Cole, that would probably be the best use of Michael Cole. Because that's
what they did last time. Remember, yes. He gave over accolades.
Yes, he could do it again. They need somebody there instead of her coming out with all of because she comes out with abrupt statements. You know that when it was written, it was all tied together, but she stops and starts and comes out with some things abruptly. if there was somebody feeding her the line and or setting it up for her where she could just say something real briefly and it would reinforce it and it'd move, that would be better. But she's just standing there in that big ring and she looks like a little girl now because she doesn't. The thing about her coming out to the octagon, she had all the confidence in the world, that game face and the fucking aura, and that nothing could rattle her. Now she looks like a little girl that's in over her head because she's not comfortable. And then Charlotte comes out, a big time entrance, all the confidence in the world. By the way, at the top of the 9 o'clock hour is when Charlotte was coming to the ring to face Ronda Rousey. That's timing for you. If somebody's switching around, I want them to see that instead of, fucking Booger and Shaky Nakamura. But again, when Charlotte comes out and she's got overconfidence, and you can tell she is a stuck-up twat. And the dichotomy there for the old Hollywood buffs, it looked like Lana Turner and Shirley Temple, or if you're more modern day, it looked like Pamela Anderson and Punky Brewster. It was just, they've taken Ronda's, in trying to humanize her. I don't know that we like the human being Ronda Rousey. I think we liked Ronda Rousey, the baddest bitch on the planet.
Well, that's one of the problems, too. You say she doesn't seem natural in there. I think if you ask some of the women who fought her in the UFC, they'll tell you it's because she's a natural heel. You have someone who probably is a bitchy fighter, and you're trying to get her out there acting like just some, hey, it's so nice to be here, and what the hell is this?
But here's the thing.
It's not her.
Against Charlotte, Ronda Rousey can be a bitch. Because, now we found a bigger bitch than Charlotte. That's what makes her, or would make her, a babyface. We found a bigger bitch. We found a tougher chick. We found a badder, whatever. All of the bad qualities of a heel, it can draw money if you find someone that has even all those bad qualities in even more abundance. And then you say, and now they become the babyface because they're going to vanquish that heel that's been running up all that heat. But you don't have to just make her Rebecca of Donnybrook Farm. And Charlotte can talk, and she picked the energy up in the promo, and she didn't get much back off of Ronda. Charlotte let loose this spiel, and Ronda's answer was, "Oh, really? Okay." But then Ronda wants to fight because it's been called for her to ask for a fight, and Charlotte steps out, and the audience is chanting, "You tapped out. You tapped," because that was the deal. Ronda armbarred her or whatever, and ankle locked her, I think, or whatever, and tapped her out in an interview here last week or whenever. But did you realize that on the go home line, and I want to like Charlotte Flair against Ronda Rousey, but the build has not helped it. Ronda reversed her go home line. Did you hear that?
I did not hear that. I missed it.
The go home line was supposed to be at WrestleMania or whatever, "You're going to tap out or I'm going to go home with your arm." Right? But she said at WrestleMania, "I'm going to go home with your arm or you'll tap out." You always save the worst of the two choices for the end, right? But in this case, she put the cart before the horse. And it was like, well, I believe that going home with her arm would be worse for Charlotte than if Charlotte just tapped out, but she put that one in front. This wasn't rotten. This segment, it didn't do what it could have done because apparently we've come to the conclusion that Ronda does not need to speak any more than necessary, and she should always do short bursts of physicality where she looks good. That's what makes Ronda Rousey attractive to people because that's what got her over when she was doing it for a shoot. And then after Charlotte left, did you get the Easter egg at the end of the show, or had you given up by then?
Oh, no, I got to see the brawl at the end of the show. I got to see it.
Okay. Again.
The Easter egg. It's funny you put it that way.
Well, because hey, normally everybody would have tuned out and they would have missed that. I mean, were you really going to fucking,
I almost did. Yeah.
sit through that main event, Zayn and Ricochet or whatever the fuck? But I will talk about the finish of that match in just a second. But anyway, Charlotte and Ronda suddenly at the end of the program, something's going on out back, and Charlotte and Ronda are in a big fight in the parking garage. And this was a good fight. They had a pull apart with the agents. There was Shane Helms was in there, Pat Buck. I think I saw Jamie Noble.
Who was the guy with the red hair?
But that was Pat Buck, I believe.
Oh, if you squinted, it was like, oh my God, Gene LaBelle's in this fight.
Come on now. No, Gene LaBelle wouldn't have put him over. But they had a nice fight, and it was, like I said, pull apart with the agents, and Charlotte suplexed and fish hooked Ronda Rousey on a car hood and left her laying, but they had a nice fight with a lot of oomph to it. And that's where, if we didn't see girls having fights in the back multiple times every week on everybody's wrestling program, this would have gotten over big. Imagine, I don't know, just for the sake of just silly foolishness, imagine that all of the fake, stupid backstage brawls on AEW amongst women and on NXT and on Raw, all the companies, imagine for the last 2 years they hadn't happened, because there hadn't been a good one, and they're all fake, and they come out of nowhere, and they look like shit, right? Can you remember a nice one?
Off the top of my head, I can't. And when you say that they happen all the time, it's to the point where sometimes every single promo is an interruption and a brawl.
Yes.
Backstage.
Yes. Imagine if none of those had happened over the last 2 years, and you saw this fight with the two biggest female stars in the company, and it having a fight where people are trying to separate them, and they're doing some pretty wild shit. This would have been circulating like the Tupelo concession stand brawl did 40 years ago or whatever. But because it's been done by lesser talent in a phonier way to less returns and less interest and over, and it's like, oh, there's Charlotte and Ronda Rousey fighting in the parking lot. Huh. There you go. But I will bring up also that the second best fight on the whole program was during Sami Zayn and Ricochet. Austin Theory came out and slapped Pat McAfee's headset off, and McAfee jumped him, and that's the best fight at ringside that I've seen in a while, because McAfee gets the picture of what wrestling is and was trying to make it exciting.
Yeah.
So that was and then did you see the finish of that match?
I ended up fast forwarding through the Sammy's. Whatever it is, I respect that they're talented, and Ricochet can fly and do tricks like no one else, but I just didn't care.
Well, Sami Zayn cared. At the end of this thing, Ricochet, and I know he only weighs 175 pounds, but it's 175 pounds. He gets up on the top rope. He jumps off and does a double forward flipping cannonball onto Sami Zayn, where I believe he was supposed to land with a leg drop, I think. I'm not sure, because the interpretation could go anywhere with the way it ended up. But imagine a guy just standing on the top rope and doing a double flip cannonball and landing with his ass in your crotch. I'm talking ass first, full weight of the body into your fucking dick and nuts while you're laying, and you should have seen Sami Zayn sell it. He bowed up and doubled up to the point where Ricochet was going to cover him off of that, and Sami Zayn had doubled up and turned over into a fetal position, and Ricochet couldn't figure out which way to turn him over to cover him. God damn. Just fuck you. I'll tell you what, there is not a single human being in the wrestling business now that I would trust to come off the top rope on me. To seeing the way that these guys are doing, I would have laid there for Bobby Eaton all day. but I would know. I've said these guys got a wide range of fucking margin of error.
Well,
but that was that.
That was Smackdown. Before we move on with other stuff, Jim, let me ask you a WWE-related story because it's coming in as of this morning as we are recording.
Uh-oh.
No, nothing bad, actually. This is somewhat positive, it appears. But we were attached to a tweet here from someone named Kevin Wong. In my exclusive...
Mr. Wong! No offense.
No, that wasn't Mr. Wong. It was like, this is my friend. It was Wang, not even Wong.
I know, Wang, Wong, same. Close.
All right, it's not
One
close.
letter.
But anyway, here's what he wrote. In my exclusive Complex interview with... that's the name of the magazine. The interview isn't Complex, necessarily. In my exclusive Complex interview with new WWE Hall of Fame inductee Sharmell, Sharmell discusses her run-ins with the Boogeyman and her time in OVW with Jim Cornette. So I'm going to pull up this quote, what she says about you, but Sharmell going into the WWE Hall of Fame, that word coming out this morning, and here it is. I found it right away. Sharmell attributes her promo skills to OVW trainer and booker Jim Cornette, the manager and mouthpiece for Mid-South Tag Team Legends, the Midnight Express. Cornette made Sharmell the valet for the Suicide Blondes. And here's a quote. Cornette would always say, "You've got to go for it," said Sharmell. He would always encourage me to be over the top. You always want to make the fans feel something. You have to go there. And there it is, a quote about some of your encouragement to her, but what are your thoughts on Sharmell?
I've said this a bunch. I love Sharmell. I liked working with her. She's a nice lady. I would say a nice girl, and 20 years ago, she was a girl. Now I'll say nice lady. She's still a lot younger than me. And as a matter of fact, we told a story here of one of my favorite incidents, favorite moments, as they say, on OVW television a few months ago. It was with Sharmell, and I said, when they did the wig spot with her, and I said, who was the other girl? And my lovely wife and talented wife, Stacy Sin, said, "Hey, you bastard, it was me. You raved about it for months." Well, it was 20 years ago, but Sharmell was signed to a developmental deal, and when she came in, she was inexperienced, but she was training, but also we made her the manager of the Suicide Blondes, who at that time were Jason Lee and Derek King. Because I'd given Candido the Suicide Blonde gimmick, and I liked it, and I liked Jason Lee, who was a young man here that had trained in OVW under Danny Davis. And Derek King from Memphis was always a super worker, and he bleached his hair blonde so he looked like Shelton Benjamin, the gold standard gimmick. So the Suicide Blondes and Sister Sharmell, she came out with, because she had been a legitimate beauty contest, contest or beauty pageant contestant or whatever, and she had the whole gimmick going on with the gown, and she had the big blonde wig, because she's the sister of the Suicide Blondes. And we did the deal with the two heel teams getting involved, where it was the Disciples of Sin and the Suicide Blondes, because they each had a girl, so we could do this spot, and the people loved it, and get them, involved with each other. But Sharmell is doing something to one of the Disciples of Sin, and Sin comes in the ring from behind her and grabs, and you know how they grab the hair, the girls do, and jerk the hair back, and the girl takes the flat back bump. Oh my God. Sin grabs the back of Sharmell's hair and jerks for all she's got, and the wig comes off, and Sin almost falls over from jerking so hard and just getting a wig, and Sharmell stands up. The look on her face was priceless, and it was a great spot. Having said that, Sharmell, she got hurt. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was a bad knee injury or something that she got hurt when she was training, and so she wasn't here very long. And she ultimately opted to not wrestle as much as valet for Booker. But I've said I always enjoyed Sharmell, and actually she was easier to work with sometimes than Booker was. Is she a Hall of Fame wrestler? for the WWE. Are they taking into account her work with the King also? Maybe she's a Hall of Fame queen consort or whatever her title was. Because I've seen people shitting on it because, well, you know, is she the second coming of Mildred Burke or whatever? But I mean, it is what it is. She was a WWE personality and she was with Booker. He was on top. So, but as a wrestler, I don't know whether she would be one of these people that would be campaigning for herself to be put in the Hall of Fame as a wrestler. It didn't go that long.
Well, again, there is a big difference between a wrestling Hall of Fame and the WWE Hall of Fame. It's really just Vince McMahon anointing people to be Hall of Famers for one reason or another. And of course, it means a lot to them. I mean, you can't ever take away the fact that it really does mean a lot to the people going in.
I'm not pooping on Sharmell, though, there. I've always liked her and thought she was a nice lady.
Well, she will be on the road to WrestleMania. Of course, that means the road to Dallas. And if Sharmell's going to be on the road and maybe her husband will be driving, I'm not really sure what goes on there, she may want to make sure that her car has the finest auto parts, the latest of everything. And maybe she could tell her husband to go to the website.
Well, there you go. Just go ahead and spill it, Brian. RockAuto.com, Sharmell. That's where you need to send Booker to. Because if he's going to put you in the Booker mobile and drive you all the way down there to Dallas to get inducted into that Hall of Fame, you don't want to break down on the side of the road along the way. And, you know, that's what people do. They break down on the side of the road when they don't do their maintenance on their automobile. And that can be expensive these days because you will get raked over the coals and treated like a refugee trying to buy auto parts at these brick and mortar stores. For heaven's sake, you'll be tortured and sent out in the streets to starve and beg for sustenance. But at rockauto.com, you go right there to one website and you can see every part of every make and model of every car. I mean, you can rebuild a DeLorean from scratch with a roll of duct tape and a screwdriver with all the stuff that you can buy at rockauto.com. If you don't believe me, well, just try it and then tell me how it works out for you. Folks, at rockauto.com, they don't have different price tiers for professional mechanics and you do-it-yourselfers. No, they treat everybody the same. They're going to fuck you the same way regardless of who you are.
No, they're not going to fuck anyone. They're going to give everyone great deals. Let's make sure we differentiate between the two. Yes.
Right. They're actually going to treat everybody the same and give you what you deserve. Their prices are the same for everybody. They're reliably low. That's how they're described here in this information I have. RockAuto.com always offers the lowest prices possible. And that's the lowest prices possible that the boss says, hey, it's not possible for you to charge any less for this shit, so don't do it. The lowest prices possible rather than changing prices based on what the market will bear like those airlines do. I mean, you try to buy just the left wing on a jumbo 747. See how much that'll cost you. RockAuto.com is for everybody. It don't require membership. It don't require membership. It does require good grammar. It does not require membership or account logins because it's a family business. And that family's been doing, well, that's the next line there. And that family's been doing this for a long time, so they got it right by now. They've served auto parts customers.
What does that mean? Does that mean family businesses don't require logins? What does that mean?
No, they're just, come on in. You're part of the family.
Oh, okay.
They know you by sight. It's where everybody knows your name. You don't have to log in. You just say, hey, it's me, Bert. I need a Framistat.
Bert.
Yeah, and then they'll say, Bert needs a Framistat. Can you mail that to him? Well, sure. Is he still living on Elm Street? Yeah. Go to rockauto.com. For auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers. They've got body parts too. If you're needing a leg or an arm or a finger or any other appendage, give rockauto.com a look in the human body parts section. Apparently they have those too.
There are no human body parts, only auto parts. It says right
here, body parts.
Only auto body parts.
Oh, well then why did they put and in between auto and body? See, that's auto parts and body parts, not auto body parts. If you've got an auto that has a body and you need a part for it, rockauto.com. The catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Apparently, they even have boats. Possibly you can join the Merchant Marine. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and figure out how you can fuck your own car up trying to put them on. And then choose the prices you prefer. And they're always, as I mentioned, reliably low. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car, truck, boat, or amphibious vehicle. And write JCE in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. You won't get a discount. They're already too cheap, but they will know that
they're not cheap.
They're cheap.
Their prices are cheap.
Well, yeah, they're cheap. They're a cheap place. You go there, they're fucking cheap. You can get all kinds of shit for very little money. They're cheap. That's what I said. Write JCE in the How Did You Hear About Us box, though, because we'll get something eventually. I'm not sure what. Amazing selection and reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com.
Well, as we said before, the road to WrestleMania leads to Dallas. That road is paved by Rock Auto, the unofficial sponsor of WrestleMania this year.
Are they really?
I just assigned them, the unofficial sponsor of WrestleMania. The unofficial sponsor of the road to WrestleMania, rockauto.com.
I missed the unofficial sponsor part of that.
Well, let's talk about the unofficial wrestling company, Jim. Did you watch any Rampage on Friday night?
No, I didn't, because it wasn't worth the breath that it would take for us to talk about it. So there you go. I'm giving everybody a break today. If you didn't watch the show on Friday night, the last thing I want to do is ruin that for you.
Well, let's stay on the topic of AEW, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of chatter on social media. A lot of people talking about the Briscoe brothers, longtime Ring of Honor tag team champions, but Ring of Honor wrestlers, Ring of Honor regulars from the beginning. Free agents, we believe as of right now, not with AEW, and a story has emerged, I believe Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select was the one who broke it, that it is in fact an executive of the company that airs their programming that has a specific problem with the Briscoe brothers being hired. How closely have you followed this story?
I've been reading it. And apparently it's, what do they call them now? Warner Media, right? A Warner Media executive. Or is it someone further down and just into TBS? Or is it a Warner Media person itself?
We were told Warner Media, but technically under that umbrella, it could be someone from TBS.
Well, but regardless, the unnamed executive is mad at the Briscoes because of Jay Briscoe's tweets from 10 years ago. And has said, you can't have them on the show. Regardless of what you think about the tweets, for any consistency to take place, they said nothing when they just featured a convicted felon in the main event of their television program last year who took the pizza cutter and was cutting on Moxley's head in the picture-in-picture during the Domino's commercial. And we all said, goddamn, they've done it now. Well, they could have done it if the executive in question that is unnamed was more phobic toward convicted felons than he was toward people who put out phobic tweets. But apparently that is the reason why that we don't get to see a good tag team program in AEW, because now the executives of the television network are telling Tony Khan who he can hire and who he can't hire on the wrestling program, because they've sent out, not because of criminal convictions, not because of accusations of anybody toward anything of any violent or criminal nature, but because of mean tweets that he has both apologized for, apologized to the fans, contributed his payoffs from some of the Ring of Honor events to an anti-gay hate group, and has actually apologized, not to every gay wrestler in the world. I don't know that there's a list, but we know that he has apologized to some gay wrestlers who none of anyone who wants to, who is in that category has said anything publicly bad about the Briscoes. So this is an issue with the TV executive and basically nobody that we can find in the wrestling business. Because everybody knows the Briscoes and they don't hate anybody. And they're not bad people. But, and as a matter of fact, and I'll tell this story in a second, I was there for the first of the two tweets that people seem to be in an uproar about. I was in town, and I'll tell you that story. But this whole thing comes down to, you know, the old bad seed argument, right? Remember the 1956 big screen adaptation of the Broadway play, The Bad Seed? It starred Patty McCormick, and she was a murderous, young, innocent-looking toddler with pigtails, but she was a psychopath and a murderer. And the question of the whole piece was, what determines the way that somebody forms their opinions, their beliefs, whether they're good or bad, evil or innocent, whatever the case? Is it heredity or is it environment? And in this case, as in a lot of the cases of the people who say stuff like this, I don't think you look at heredity. I think you look at environment. And if the Briscoes, I'm sure they've got a couple of physical assaults on their record, being dim boys from Delaware, but I don't think it's any hate crimes. I think it's probably personal issues. They've got no background of being thieves or stealing things or having drug dependency or anything otherwise than they're two chicken farmers from Sandy Fork, Delaware. I would venture to guess, thankfully I haven't seen them since Donald Trump became a thing that we should talk about, but I would venture to guess, if I would, that the Briscoe family is probably conservative. And that's another reason I never asked them their political viewpoints, because I hate to have people's my opinion of people ruined when I like somebody. And I also never asked them about religion, but I have pretty good belief that they're very religious also. And I've got to wonder if Mark and Jay Briscoe do listen to the news, and Mark Briscoe, by the way, is a goddamn genius, believe it or not. As far as IQ goes, he's a fucking smart guy. But if they do listen to the news, I bet you they're listening to Fox or the right-wing news or whatever. And I'm going to make a point on this in a second. Because I saw this in person. In 2011, we're in New York City for Best in the World, the Ring of Honor pay-per-view. And this was the weekend that the first of the two tweets that people are not happy about came out. And Brian, you've been there to the Manhattan Center there, and it's right in the middle of downtown New York, the city, as they say, Manhattan. And the guys would all fly in and get there early because you never know with travel into New York. We want to make sure everybody's in the building so we know if we have to make any substitutions. And then once everybody's checked in 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, especially if they've got their finish, we would let them go and walk around, get something to eat, walk down the block, go to a diner, get a burger, whatever the fuck, right? Do something instead of just sitting there in those holding cell locker rooms in the Manhattan Center and come back at their appointed time. And I was up there this weekend, that weekend, and Stace was with me. And so a bunch of the guys went walking out to go eat, and the Briscoes were amongst them. And then Stace says, well, I'm going to go walk around because she wasn't there to work. She were on vacation after that show. So she goes walking around New York because she likes the place. Well, Brian, that was, I don't know what the parade was, but that was the day of one of the major gay pride parades in New York City. And somehow or another, both the Briscoe brothers on one side of the parade, and Stace was down, she didn't know they had the same problem, but she came in huffing and puffing and going, I had to walk 8 or 10 blocks around the parade to get back to the building here because they shut the street off after I passed. Well, then we're looking for the Briscoes. They've got caught also. And Brian, I don't know if you've seen the New York gay pride parades. Stace is from San Francisco. She's used to it. She's taken a few pictures with her cell phone. She said it was very flamboyant because they do know how to put on a parade. And you're seeing some things in that parade that chances are you don't see when you go to the county seat of Sussex County, Delaware, or wander around the city limits of Sandy Fork. It had to be a culture shock. So now I'm envisioning the Briscoe brothers, 2 chicken farmers, stuck on the other side of the gay pride parade, late, worried they're going to get fined, and trying to get back to the building in the middle of New York City. This was the Beverly Hillbillies on LSD. And they get back finally, and they apologize, and Jay's hot, and he tweeted something about, boy, there's a lot of people here in New York today. What the fuck? Because he'd never seen anything like that in his life. If you've seen the gay pride parades from San Francisco on television, this was what he was seeing, and he was stunned to say the least. And then the second time was a couple years later when the Delaware passed gay marriage. And this one was actually a little worse to me, and not born of consternation of being stuck in the middle of downtown New York, not being able to find your way out of it. When he said, well, that's all well and good that gay people can get married, but if you try to teach my kids that's right, I'll shoot you. Now that was probably not the best choice of words. However, having said that, that's when he apologized. That's when he was told it was the wrong thing to say. He upset people. He donated some of his money. And actually, I think that's when he got off Twitter for quite a while, which is probably for the best. Okay, there have been people that have committed felonies and harmed people. And they're on television on everybody's fucking network. And by the way, not just wrestlers. Brian, you're in the music business or have been. Certainly to fuck, Snoop Doggy Dogg has been arrested for something. One would think.
Yeah, I don't want to single out Snoop. I'm
talking about TBS. TBS, the big show, right?
Well, right. And he was, I believe, on trial for murder at one point in the 90s.
Yes. So which is worse? He sent a mean tweet or he was on trial for murder? Which would the TBS executives prefer to fuck?
He was acquitted. Let me just throw that in there, too. He was acquitted.
And they couldn't prove it.
Or he didn't do it.
Well,
it's another way to look at it.
Okay, Jay didn't do anything except say something mean, and he apologized for it.
I'm not attacking
I know,
Jay Briscoe.
but I'm saying let's find some consistency with the same network umbrella. Who all on all of your programs has ever done or said anything wrong? And the point being, I don't blame the Briscoes because I know the Briscoes. I blame environment, and I blame the things that they hear, just like all these other people. The day that gay marriage was approved I don't know about, I wasn't watching the TV in Delaware, but I've watched some TV reports on various places. And you've got the nuts, the right-wingers say, oh, now this means that they'll be able to come in the bathroom at my kids' grade school and molest them and breed them like rabbits or whatever the fuck. Whatever their goddamn ridiculous things are that are going to come up whenever anybody gives any gay rights to anybody. Oh, but it'll lead to this or that. Maybe they were listening to that. He's got young children. He's easily led because he believes in these things that he's hearing. And he thinks somebody's going to molest my kids. I'm going to say something about it. All right, well, later on, somebody told him, yeah, that's kind of stupid, and it ain't going to happen. And if we want to get to the root of homophobia, should we not instead put the microscope on the all-time leaders in phobias against other people's races, opinions, and beliefs, religion? Because I know somebody who shall remain nameless, who's in my age category, who's both gay and Catholic. And I was talking to him one time. I wasn't talking to him about, hey, you're gay and Catholic. What's that like? He just brought it up. He said, well, Corny, you know, I'm doomed to burn in hell anyway. I said, what are you talking about? Well, I'm gay. So what they got to do? Well, I'm going to burn in hell. Wait a minute. You really get into that religion shit. Oh, yeah. I'm Catholic. This is what I believe. I was raised this way. Why do you believe this if the bottom line is you're going to burn in hell and fire and brimstone because you're a horrible person just because of who you're attracted to, even though you're not a horrible person? Why do you? Well, Corny, it's God. It's true. It's religion. It's, you know, they believe it even when it is detrimental to their mental health, well-being, happiness, whatever, because that's how they were brought up and that's how they were taught. And if we're ever going to get anywhere, we got to break that string. Hating yourself for who you may be attracted to because people have taught you that there's an invisible, fictitious, supreme being in the sky that thinks that you're horrible for doing what you're doing is bullshit. And that's why I've also said I believe religion is the most widely accepted form of child abuse, because you are teaching your children from the time that they're cognizant of anything lies and science fiction that leads them to think that other human beings are not worthy of being who they are because God would be mad at them. I don't have a problem with hating a motherfucker because he's done something to me personally. I'm fully in favor of that. I think more people should do that. But to hate somebody that you otherwise would agree with or not have any problem with because God said to is ridiculous. And that's how people are taught. And that's where this shit comes from, especially with people like the Briscoes. They don't have hate for people, and they're honest people, and they're fine wrestlers and good performers, but they've been taught that priorities on everybody, all these people that fit in this category, they're misplaced. They've been taught, okay, as long as God or the right wing says so, these things should be this way, but it's not just limited to the Briscoes. And I'll say this again and then open the floor to you, Brian. If they're going to tell the wrestling promoter who to book on his television program on their air, which they have the right to, then there ought to be some consistency across all the shows and all the platforms instead of, well, this guy was on trial for murder, but that was 25 years ago, and now he's a big celebrity. So that's better than this guy who sent a mean and ill-informed tweet 10 years ago, but he's not a celebrity. There's no consistency. And for all the people who have scoffed at me, all the times that I've said that a fucking TV network executive can be your best friend or your worst nightmare because they can help you or fuck you up for no reason in a heartbeat, here's a classic example. They didn't get kicked off the air for the pizza cutter, but who knows what they'll get kicked off the air for next. Either they hire the wrong person or somebody gets paralyzed on live TV and the network don't like that. Or somebody gets up on the wrong side of the bed or a merger takes place. But Brian, your thoughts on anything I've just said? Disagree with me if you feel the need.
Well, you said a lot, so I got to remember everything. I think at a minimum,
you should be taking notes.
At a minimum, you could say that the guy's ignorant. Now, there is dangerous ignorant, and there's, I don't want to say harmless, but relatively harmless ignorant. The guy's ignorant. How homophobic is he? I mean, look at who he's fucking worked for in his career.
He was working for Carrie Silkin when he said that.
Everyone he worked for until Sinclair was an openly gay man.
But now, here's the thing. I mean, knowing the Briscoes, I'm not sure they know how to look for that or to notice it if it's there. So, I don't know. But go ahead.
I think in terms of the consistency thing, first of all, we don't know the fact that some unnamed executive made this edict tells me either this unnamed executive closely follows independent wrestling or someone put this in front of him.
Yeah.
So in terms of consistency, put a big story in front of a guy that he's afraid is going to break, and I'm sure they may make the same decision.
Put a big story in front of the guy that he's afraid is going to break 9 years ago?
I think unfortunately, it's realistic to expect that if you sign someone, if you put someone on your airwaves, just to make it a loose thing, who did something heinous, awful, said something awful, heinous at any point, at least in the last 45 years, you risk a social media barrage for at least a time. Some people, some companies will wait it out. Some companies say, we don't want any of this. We don't want any of this kind of attention. We don't want any involvement in this. I think that's what it is.
Then who was it that put it in front of them?
Well,
was it somebody in the company that didn't want company in the company? Or was it some idiot like the Yenta outside the company that just has no life and wants to cause trouble for other people?
And the other thing, too, is you can't even blame Tony Khan for this, because in terms of consistency, when Sammy Guevara had his issue where he was on tape saying he wanted to rape Sasha Banks, they sent him away for a little while. They suspended him. They said they sent him to counseling. He apologized to Sasha Banks and anyone else he offended. And he came back, and to the best of my knowledge, there haven't been any other issues since. It was an isolated, ignorant moment, it appears, as of this second. And it was a really highly offensive thing, and people have kind of gotten past it. I haven't heard his apology, so I don't know what he said. There has to be an apology. There has to be some forgiveness, but
I heard it years ago. It's been so long, I don't remember what he said.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about what he has said. I've read all these articles about what he wrote in the tweet. I've never heard anything about his apology, but maybe they should say something. I mean, at this point, they need to cover their ass and say something to save their career. Hey, listen, we said some stupid shit. We don't mean it. We don't mean it in a malicious sense, whatever they have to say. But they're silent on this, and I don't think that helps either.
Well, geez, would you, if you were them, would you want to say anything? It's like,
if it was something I didn't believe, and I think I made a big mistake, and I apologize for it, yeah. No one else is going to defend me. I'm going to speak up, and I'm going to say, hey, this is bullshit.
Well, but see, here's the thing, and I can understand because he wouldn't have said it if he didn't mean it, because he did mean it. He didn't want anybody teaching his kids that they should marry the same-sex people, because he is taught that is the worst thing. He's been taught from when he was a kid.
And he wanted to shoot them, right?
His fathers were taught from when they were kid, whatever, that's the worst thing that you can do. And so that's what I'm saying. Ignorant, by definition, is somewhat. You're not stupid if you're ignorant. If you're stupid, you're a fucking just an idiot. But if you're ignorant, that means there's something you do not know. You are ignorant of this fact or ignorant of that happening or whatever. That means you can learn. And I think that's what we ought to be working on, instead of acting like that because Jay Briscoe has been taught this shit that's wrong shit, just like that's what Twitter's cracking down on now. Misinformation about COVID. They kicked Trump off for lying about the election. There are too many people in the world that believe shit that they're taught, because most of the time, people that are teaching them these things are people that they are supposed to respect, obey, look up to, parents, clergymen, whatever. Let's get to the root of that. I'm sure he meant it when he said it, because he's thinking, oh my God, they're going to make my kids sexual preverts. Problem is, all that's bullshit. But
what does he mean now? That's what he hasn't said.
And I agree. Now maybe he should say so. I've been told. I understand better. I know more gay people. I don't know what, but yes, there might need to be something there. But at the same time, don't tell Jay Briscoe's kids anything. And they're grown up now. You know what? Now, here's another thing. Now his little kids are in school and grown up, and they're 10 years older. I don't know how old they were then. They probably got more gay friends than Jay Briscoe's ever known gay people. And they don't see, and now he's probably like, oh shit, they're over to the house. Well, okay. But it takes time. But again, I'm not saying what he wrote was right or the intention. I wouldn't even have tweeted that. But I got a tickle out of being there for one of the incidents, because it was the goddamn fish out of water thing, stressed out times 100, and culture shock. But now the time has gone on and he's learned and he's moved on. Shouldn't we? Again, there was no crime. There was no assault. There was no threatening of anybody in specific. There was an apology. There was a financial restitution, blah, blah, blah. Is this the biggest thing that we got to worry about today?
It shouldn't be. And like I said, I think what'll put it to bed one way or another, he needs to say something. He said something when it happened however many years ago. He needs to come out and say something now, defend himself. Let's hear what he has to say.
But you know what? Then, and here's what I hate about that, because then it'd be the only guys in the world that you still can believe their fucking gimmick in the wrestling business, and he's got to come out and be a nice guy and apologize and be all contrite. And
he doesn't have to be a nice guy or contrite. He has to mean it. I mean, that's really all it has to be. He doesn't have to be a nice guy and come out there and smile or put his teeth in or whatever the fuck they do. Just has to mean it. It just has to be a genuine.
That's the same thing. That fucking classic fucking swamp dwelling Southern comfort tag team starts being all nice and apologizing for saying mean things, they've shot their fucking aura.
One last question about all this. The Warner Media executive, the unnamed executive, who apparently put his foot down, and this was the reason why the Briscoe brothers will not appear on AEW programming on TBS or TNT, would that prevent Tony from signing them to Ring of Honor?
Unless Ring of Honor was going to be on TBS or TNT, I don't see how it would. And by the way, speaking of which, by the way, I don't know if people know this. I'll say it. What the fuck? Bring it up now. It's not like he already hasn't, Jay Briscoe, paid some penance, because at the time that second tweet came out, I believe it was the second one, or maybe it was the first one. I don't know, but the WWE was, it may have been the first one, but the WWE was taking a look at him, or wanting to take a look at him, wanting to bring him down, do one of those tryouts like they did with, remember when they did a tryout with Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards and brought him down, treat him like job guys for 2 weeks. But they dropped that idea over the tweet also way back then. And I've told Delirious one day, I said, well, there's the first in the history of Twitter, the first $1 million tweet. But at the same time, I was convinced that, and they were going to let him go because everybody that knew the Briscoes wanted to see them succeed. And they were contractually at a point where they were going to let him go and see what the the feedback was, but it didn't come to that because they wanted them to get ahead. But I think the WWE would have ruined the Briscoes, and they would have already we wouldn't be having this conversation. They'd be forgotten about because we saw what happened with Hero and Claudio, and there's no way the Briscoes could be the Briscoes in that sterile WWE environment. But they already paid for it in terms of they might have got a contract then, but they didn't. So what the fuck? Quit beating the fucking guy up. The former president of these United States was a lying sack of shit that caused the fucking people of the United States to try to overthrow their own government and got kicked off of fucking Twitter. And he's still welcome, I'm sure, on television, TBS or otherwise, unfortunately. So
I don't know if he's on TBS. I was thinking they air Home Alone, and I think they edited him out of Home Alone.
Did they? Well, good.
At least in Canada, I think I read that.
But anyway, so I'm of the opinion, Jesus Christ, leave Jay Briscoe alone. They're nice guys. They probably learned their lesson by now, and they can be a benefit to us when we're watching this subpar wrestling program. But who knows? Maybe that Warner Media executive, now that he's got new bosses, he might be overruled. Or maybe the new bosses will just overrule everybody and say, we don't like wrestling at all. Fuck it. You heard about this, right?
I did hear a little bit about this, yes.
They're all working for Discovery now. The Food Network and the Travel Channel and Discovery. And they're going to have a new series where wrestlers go out in search of Bigfoot.
I think Jericho already did a series like that, actually. Someone told me where he looks for different things like Bigfoot.
No, he was looking for big mouth.
Big hair.
Yeah. But so now Discovery, and remember, all these mergers, sooner or later, you're going to find trouble in paradise. It was the merger between Turner and Time Warner that took Turner out of power and led to the vulnerability of WCW to be sold at a fire sale price because they didn't want the fucking thing. And that was 20 years ago. And now, how many mergers have there been since then? Because then Turner and Time Warner, and then it became
AOL Time Warner.
AOL Time Warner, and then Warner Media, and now Discovery. So people laugh when I say this. They go, oh, it's a hit show. They all want to hit. No, they don't want fucking hit shows. They want shows that they want. It's like Vince booking. He doesn't want stars. He wants people that he wants to be stars to be stars. They don't want hit shows. They want shows to be hits that are shows they want to be hit shows. Or they want it to fit their programming vision. Or they've got a pet peeve somewhere, like the station manager in Cincinnati with the Sheik's tape with the snake, or this Warner Media executive with the Briscoes tweets, or whatever the case. And that's why I always say, why shoot yourself in the foot, the self-inflicted shit, like the convicted felon with the pizza cutter? Or is somebody going to break their neck? Well, they've already broken their neck on live television. Excuse me, is somebody going to be paralyzed or killed on live television? That causes a problem. Or is somebody else going to do something stupid? Or again, is just somebody going to be in charge with the pet peeve? And how many times have you read wrestlers' books and read the stories of different wrestling promotions and heard some guy, whether at a local TV station or at a cable network or whatever, say, wrestling ain't never going to be on my channel? Because there's those people. So no reason to give them ammunition is what I've been saying. But we'll see. Discovery, they sound a little brainy, a little highfalutin for AEW wrestling, don't they to you?
No, I think it'll be a good fit. They have plenty of dumb shows too.
I just want to, maybe that's where Brandy will land. On the cooking of the Food Network.
Ah, interesting. I don't think anyone will watch, but interesting. However, Jim, I was going to bring up before with the Briscoes, if we're going to take it that they're not going to be going to AEW, they're probably going to have more time on the chicken farm. They may want to come up with a new way, a better way of tracking inventory.
Well, that's right, because those chickens, as they start clucking around, those clucking things they'll cluster up like quail or coils. And then when they spread apart, you can't figure out whether you've already counted them or whether you got more counting to do. And I'll tell you what, it's a problem in any business, not just the chicken plucking business. It's a problem in any business. You've heard of a CFO, Brian, right? A CFO, that's a chief financial officer.
Of course, yes.
That's what that is. And the CFO is critical to the strategy and success of whatever your business is. But there are two kinds of CFOs, Brian. One of them, like I used to be, running Cornette's Collectibles. Spreadsheets everywhere. Actually, I had no spreadsheets. I don't know how to use those. I had pad and paper everywhere. I was going through my manual processes. I was making errors. There was a lack of visibility into my numbers because sometimes I'd take my glasses off and forget where I put them. I couldn't see anything. It would take me weeks to close my books. But the other kind of CFO, Brian, on top of their game, like the feather bottoms, automated reports, the inventory. I know where everything is and how, just like that. E-commerce, HR flow, words and phrases. I'm telling you, insights. If I had an HR flow, once a month I used to, but I reached a certain age for my HR flow. But insights will come to you with the click of a button with our friends at NetSuite. Because at NetSuite, you've got visibility and control of your financials, your inventory, your HR, your planning, your budgeting. If you know how to do all that stuff, you'll have full control over it. If you don't, you'll be able to control whoever does. That's why NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system. You cannot make any more money investing in clouds than you can when you go to NetSuite. They are used by over 28,000 growing businesses and apparently 4 or 5 internet troll farms. But they're the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Folks, with NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time. As a matter of fact, I closed my books last night within 10 or 15 minutes after laying down. I said, I'll read for a minute, then I got sleepy. I just closed the book. 93% of surveyed businesses increased their visibility and control after upgrading to NetSuite. 7% are currently under indictment, but only 2% anticipate a conviction. Folks, right now, over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. Head to NetSuite, that's netsuite.com/JCE for a special one-of-a-kind financing offer. You're not going to believe this. We can't even talk about it right here on the program. You got to call the hotline. netsuite.com/JCE. That's netsuite.com/JCE for a one-of-a-kind financing offer. You're a sucker if you don't get in on this one, folks. I'm telling you what, you'll be farting through silk by the time NetSuite gets finished with you.
All right, well, that's a nice way to look at it. But Jim, we'll move on with the show. I'm reading something right now actually on Facebook, some sad news I'll bring up to you. Polish Joe Chupik of AWA fame just posted that he got the news that his first boss, Mike Shields, passed away this morning.
Oh, no.
Of course, Mike gave him his first job in the AWA, but I know that you would know Mike Shields. Wanted to bring this up to you.
I saw Mike Shields, it was in Nashville, at the fairgrounds for I think it was a comic convention, but Me and the Midnight were there. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. I believe Me and the Midnight were there, and Jerry Jarrett came by and Bill Dundee to see Mike Shields. Mike had stopped by. Mark James was there. And now a lot of people are going, well, who the fuck is Mike Shields? Mike Shields started out in the early 70s as the guy who, in Memphis and in that territory, not only shot all the film, used the film camera before they had a video camera, shot the film of the matches in Memphis and occasionally in other arenas, but also did a lot of the still photography and a lot of the publicity pictures, the 8x10s from all of the Tennessee Territory guys. This was when Nick and Jarrett were still together, so it was the whole territory. Stuff from 73, 74, 75, 76 was all shot by Mike Shields. He was a great photographer, and actually I have a picture that, as Mike had over the last number of years had been going through all his old negatives and finding stuff and everything, and Mark James got this for me. Mike is the one who shot the famous Andre the Giant Jerry Lawler match in Louisville in April of 77 that made the Bill Apter's magazines, and where they made up the backstory that Lawler had won the match. And Midget beats Andre the Giant, and that was the cause of consternation that year at the NWA meeting when Vince Sr. asked him, who's the little midget that beat Andre the Giant? Terry, but yeah, who is that little son of a bitch? But Mike shot those pictures, and in one of them, Lawler has got a headlock on Andre, and Andre did his deal where he stood up and just stood straight up, and Lawler's feet are off the ground, and he's got the shocked face, and I am in the background shooting from the other side of the ring, and Mike shot. So he took a picture of me taking a picture of Lawler versus Andre. And Mark James got me that a print of that for a present here several years ago. But Mike, a real nice guy. And then actually what happened was they ended up getting the video equipment in Memphis right about the time that Jarrett started working with Vern Gagne in 1978. That was when Jarrett started recognizing the AWA champion. And he brought down Bockwinkel. Vern Gagne worked the first show in Memphis, and he was using Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, blah, blah, blah. Vern made it known that he needed a guy to do their video and shoot the arena matches and et cetera. And he hooked Vern up with Mike Shields, because at that point, Randy West, Jerry's son-in-law, had married into the family, and he's the one that started using the new video equipment they got and started doing the editing and putting together the MTV-like music video specials just a couple of years later. So Mike Shields went off to work for Vern and was there for I guess, the rest of the run of the AWA. And in trivia note, Mike Shields is one of the guys that Eric Bischoff contacted to write him a letter of recommendation to the people at Turner when he was trying to get in there and get that spot. And basically Bischoff had promised Mike Shields, and he told me this to my face, Mike did. He promised me that he'd bring me down to Atlanta and get me a high-paying job if I wrote a glowing letter saying how important he was to Vern's operation. So I did, and he didn't. But anyway, that's, I guess Mike would have been, easily in his early 70s. I hate to hear that. And I don't know what he's done with his photography. Like I said, I know he'd been going through it and, printing some things off, but he has to have somewhere, his family now has a treasure trove of negatives and old pictures and things from the Tennessee Territory back in the 70s. But he was very, very instrumental. And really, he was the main photographer right before me. As I started taking the pictures in Louisville, he was concentrating more on the video work, and then he went to work for Vern. I took over pretty much all the photography in the territory, and Randy West started doing the video.
Jim, our next question sent on Twitter, actually, using the hashtag CornyDriveThru, is from Mark Cole. I heard a story recently that in 1990, after a tag team match, JYD and Luger had a locker room confrontation that ended with JYD choking out Lex with his dog chain. Was Jim there? Can he confirm or deny?
Well, I wasn't there. I wasn't even there. It was Owen. No, I honestly, I remember something about Dog and Lex having an issue. I don't remember that it led to him choking him out with his dog chain. Do you remember? Can you jog my memory? Or
I don't remember this, and I'm dying to go back to my old 1990 newsletters to see what I can find out. Actually.
Yeah, I don't. I think at some point Lex and Dog may have had words, but I don't believe that there was a choke out with the dog chain involved. That would have replaced Luger and Brody's cage match in Luger's pantheon of strange stories.
It would have been up there with the squeegee for that era.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get another question.
But Mark, we love you anyway, and thank you again for that gift card you sent me.
This one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
I knew it wouldn't take much longer.
Matt Hardy recently signed a contract extension with AEW. Is it possible that he could regain his teleportation and icebox wardrobe changing powers, or do you think he will be Matt Hardy from now on?
Well, I hesitate to say that he won't teleport anymore or whatever, but no, obviously the reason why this extension was signed is because Jeff became available. And I'm not saying that Tony would have fired him otherwise, but I mean, let's face it.
But he was replaceable until Jeff showed up.
Yes, he's not set the world on fire as far as being someone that they could not do without. I don't know how much money he's making. So if it was, they brought him in as a top wrestler, and now he's an underneath manager. So if he's still making the same amount of money he was when they brought him in, obviously they would have looked at that. But now with Jeff, he's got the new lease on life, and they got to lock him up. So that was serendipitous timing.
All right. I guess that was that question.
Well, I mean, what else can you say? I mean, his stock just went up dramatically. And if it's a 2-year extension and they got Jeff for 2 years, I'm not even knocking the Hardy Boys. I've always been big fans of the Hardy Boys until, as I said, Matt started teleporting and changing clothes in the ice machine. But they are over. It's almost impossible for anybody to bury Jeff at this point. The people that like him, they like him. And they're going to like seeing the Hardy Boys back together because it's been, 3 years? Like the last time they got together 5 years ago, it had been 3 years. So honestly, I have to say that if the Hardy Boys had been together consistently for the past 5 years, we might be having a different conversation because I don't know if either one of them would still be worth, a major investment, because the part of it's new, and the people are also smart enough to know this might be the last run. So we get to see the Hardys back together for the foreseeable future, if nobody gets hurt for the next couple of years. But as I said on the Experience last week, the Hardys, and this is not a knock, they're not going to get any more over than they already are right now. It's like, I could say that about Steve Austin. Steve Austin is not going to ever get over any more than he is right now because he's about as over as you can get. And it's the nostalgia of seeing the Hardys together and their magnetism, whether they've slowed a step in the ring or not, the people still want to see them together. But it can't be a steady diet. They can't be around like Garcia and 2.0, or elsewise people will get tired of it before the 2 years is up, because it's novel and it's new and it's nostalgia, and they are really over and really popular. But if it's still not kept a little bit special, that's why I thought they should have led with Jesus Christ. Bring them back together, get the fucking pop on that, and put them straight in with the fucking Hardy Boys. Because they're imitators. They're cosplayers. That's the point. You'll get more out of that now than you will in 6 months after the people have seen the Hardy Boys back against Joe, Tom, Bill, and Fred.
All right. Well, let's get another question here. This next one, Jim, was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Darm in Vancouver, Canada.
From who?
Darm.
D-A-R-M.
D-H-A-R-M.
Well, that's that darn Darm.
Here's his question. And he says, many thanks for the podcast. So let's be nice to him, Jim.
Okay. All right, Darm. Thank you. You're welcome.
A quick question. Do you think there's a better way to fill out an arena for shows where the hard cam side is tarped off or only has a few fans sitting in that section? The reason I ask is that many of the weekly wrestling shows are flat. If wrestlers in the ring are working for the cameras, the live audience might get bored because they're stuck watching people's backs. In turn, the audience at home turns out because of a boring presentation.
Well, there was a couple of times in WCW during the last year me and the Midnight Express were there when it was the TV tapings, especially some of them were brutal, right? And they would leave the entire hard camera side empty because they wanted all the people across from the camera where you could see them, which I've done the same thing on my tapings. Of course, I wasn't running a multi-million-dollar company. But we used to specifically, I would especially, working the ringside, I'd turn to the empty side of the arena and scream and yell at those people like there were people there. And you shut up too. And I'm pointing up at these giant, vast, empty seats. Unless you can fill the building up that you're in, you have to kind of do it that way. But the problem is that the guys in the WWE specifically are taught to work the camera side at the expense of the live audience. It's like they're eavesdroppers and they're not really in on it. Whenever I was doing a live interview or in any company but the WWF, some in the WWF, but more in other places, because I've mentioned in the WWF, especially when Vince was still hosting the show and he would be doing the interviews. And I'd be in there with me and Vader or me and Bulldog or me and Yoko and Fuji, whatever. He's holding the microphone. That's fine. He's the interviewer. But the floor camera guy would get right up in the ring and right up in our face to get that close up. And I wouldn't be able to look out at the people and the fans. The cameraman was blocking my view. And I always like to, even though I'm, doing the promo I'm going to do, I like to see what the reaction is. I like to be able to see people. It was bothersome to me to have that cameraman in my way. They didn't do that in WCW. They didn't do it in Crockett. They didn't do it in other promotions. And of course, you never saw that because, as said, the director, being the WWF got great directors, he would tell the floor guy, okay, back out. And as he'd back out, then he would take the hard camera shot. You'd never see the floor camera guy in the picture, but he was right up your face. And that used to throw me the fuck off just because I like to be able to gesture, move my arms, see the people, etc. But doing a live interview in the ring, I would wander around. I would turn and I would see and I'd gesture to the people on one side of me or the people on the other side of me. You try to bring them all in so that the live audience, as well as your audience at home, it feels like they're involved in it. The audience at home is lucky they only see what's across from the camera, so they don't see the whole empty side of the building unless the director and or the cameramen are inexperienced or not very good, in which case they'll shoot off into the empty seats and you'll see it. But the people at home are supposed to think all those seats are filled. So you have to work toward that direction for the camera, but you've also got to include the people in the arena live. And that's what I always try to do to the best of my ability, even when I was rooted to a spot because of a tight camera shot or whatever.
So is there a better way of doing it now?
Well, I mean, what kind of budget you got? For the average, indie show, no, you need a hard camera to follow. I always used to tell the inexperienced camera people that we might get in OVW or Ring of Honor or wherever it was on a budget, if all else fails, post to post, that's your hard camera shot. And if it's a tag team match, you might want to widen out a little bit past the post because you want to see the guys on the aprons. And if they go out on the floor, we're going to have a little bit of notice of that, and we can cover it with the floor cameras. But your hard camera shot's your insurance shot. If it's just locked down and post to post, you got the whole ring. Whatever happens in the ring, at least you'll get some kind of shot of it. I mean, there's ways you can play with the hard camera. Do you put it up a little higher? Do you keep it on the more toward the same level as the ring? There's pluses and drawbacks to each of those angles. You've got to have at least 2 floor cameras, and there's only so many places you can put those. If you've got a budget, you can have a couple more floors and pay a couple more camera guys so you can ISO some things. You can tell one of those floor guys, hey, just concentrate on so-and-so's facial expression. Or if you've got a boom, you can do those nice sweeping boom shots of your big building. But if you ain't got a big building, a boom makes it look like you're trying to make a closet look fucking fancy. So it just depends. There's different ways to shoot different buildings that you can come up with, but overall, the shooting of the wrestling show is not necessarily the problem these days. It's what's being shot. And the fact that some of the people coming up with what's being shot should be shot. That's the problem.
All right, well, let's go to our next question here, Jim. Several people have sent in something in the last couple of weeks. Did you see, and I have some quotes here, Tony Khan recently revealed, I'm trying to see where this was. I think it was a pre-AEW Revolution media call. It appears that's what it was. He revealed that Jim Ross openly spoke out against Orange Cassidy in a production meeting a while back. Did you see this?
Yes, I did. This was one of the first, I believe, the way he was phrased, one of the first production meetings when they first went on the air. And apparently, Tony or somebody who was conducting the meeting was going on and on about Orange Cassidy, and JR called Tony out and said, what the fuck this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And why are we spending time on this?
Wait, I have the exact quote here. If you
okay,
want
go ahead. Go ahead.
This is from Tony Khan. In the production meeting, I don't think I've told this story before. I don't know if either one of them would mind, but I'll just be honest with you guys in the spirit of doing a lot of interviews on the road to Revolution. And you guys are the guys I always talk to.
I'll tell you what, if you told Tony Khan that every comma is going to cost you $500, his father would be bankrupt in a week.
We were in the production meeting the first year, and JR, not under his breath, said something about how stupid the whole thing was in the first year and in front of everyone, because Jim called me out in front of the entire room. So I said back to him, Jim, this is getting over, and this is doing ratings every time, and we've barely scratched the surface on what this guy can do. And he's actually a really good wrestler, and I think you should give him a chance and talk to him, because he is actually a very intelligent wrestling person once you get to know him. And we have barely scratched the surface on what this guy can do.
2 years later, they're still scratching that surface. You should have picked a fucking scab. It would have been more productive. I'm not surprised at that at all, because I would expect that Jim Ross, as a matter of fact, the last time I saw JR in person was at the Charlotte Fan Fest was it 2000? It was the year before AEW went on the air. So it was right before. That would have been 2019. That's the last time I did a Fan Fest, right?
It would have been either 2018 or 19. 19 is when they came on the air.
Yeah,
I don't remember what you did or didn't.
The point is, I said to JR, I said, what are you going to? He said, well, Corny, it's a highly paid spot they've given me. I said, you're going to have to fucking call all this foolishness. And the guy that sticks his hands in his pockets, and he looked at me quizzically like, what are you talking about? You'll see all this shit. I can see JR sitting there hearing Tony Khan go on about this goof and how great he is, and him just go, wait a minute, what the fuck? Being the voice of reason. And apparently it didn't work. Tony still thought, it's getting over. We haven't even scratched the surface. Well, that surface has taken a long time for them to scratch, because it's 2 years later or more, and he's not done a goddamn thing different yet. It's still the same joke that wasn't funny then. But like this is some kind of revelation, I was not surprised because that's the kind of thing that JR does. He says what everybody else is thinking in the meeting. When he hears completely preposterous horse shit, he will bring it up. And apparently that was the first sign to him that he might as well give it up because Tony ain't going to listen. And then he tells all the fucking guys, if he tweeted it, then you know he said it in person before he tweeted it about the clustering up like quail. They thought it was coils because none of them are ornithologists. And they don't listen. So now he's just given up and he'll do the verbal eye roll on the stupider shit. But he's given up trying to tell these idiots what the fuck's going on because they don't listen. And they don't listen because Tony backs them up because Tony is so easily impressed. Have you ever seen any businessman in any business or endeavor or line of work that is easily as impressed as Tony Khan about mediocre and subpar bullshit? And he's over the moon about all of it. So the mascot was probably the first sign to Jim Ross that I'm not in a fucking world here where anything has to make sense.
The other question is, and obviously we're in a game where if you have a show on TV, the station wants ratings. They want to sell off those ratings. So ratings are the most important fucking thing. But when the only defense for someone being there is they get ratings, to a point, at a certain point, if it's detrimental to everything else, is it worth it? You know, if Sable, I mean, should they put the world title on Sable? You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, you have to kind of weigh things, I think.
Well, and also, here's the thing. You said the most important thing to the TV people is ratings. That's not true. The most important thing is money. The primary way they get there is ratings. But, as an example, WCYB TV Channel 5 in Bristol, Virginia, the NBC affiliate that services the Tri-Cities of Tennessee and Virginia, Bristol, Kingsport, Johnson City. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was on that station on Sunday mornings for 4 straight years. Every week, we would either win our time slot. Well, actually, no. At first, we were Sunday, then we were Saturday. The point is, there was a couple, but the point is, every week we'd win our time slot, but they still treated us like paid programming. But we weren't paying a full infomercial rate. The original sales manager that I spoke to and Sandy Scott and I made the deal with liked a wrestling program. He knew that people would watch it. He wasn't going to give us the time for nothing because he didn't have the power and they didn't do that back then. But he gave us a deal, you know, part pay and part barter. We got X amount of commercial time in the show plus the program broadcast. It was like $700 a week. And then they got 4 minutes of commercial time or whatever the split was. And that's the way that it existed throughout our whole arrangement. And we were billed once a month. At the end of the month, sometimes I didn't have that $2,800. And I'd call a sales manager. I'd say, I'm sending you a check for 2 weeks and I will make it up. We got a big show coming up. And so at the end of the next month, I'd send them 6 weeks or whatever the case. Sometimes we were $4,000 or $5,000 behind. Sometimes we were $1,000 or $2,000 ahead, but we did business for 4 years and everything was fine. And everybody watched the show. It was the highest rated program in the time slot in the Tri-Cities. Then we get a new sales manager. The new sales manager don't like wrestling. And the new sales manager calls me one day because we're behind. So, we didn't get your payment. I said, well, I've sent you a check for 2 weeks and we're going to send, well, this is supposed to be paid on a weekly basis. What? Well, by the nature of the contract that was written, that was signed, you're supposed to pay every week. Well, we've always been billed for a month. And, paying, for every week, but at a month at a time. Well, here's what's going to happen now. You're going to pay every week. The check is going to accompany the tape or we're not going to air the program. What? Yes. Well, you realize we're winning the rate. He didn't give a shit about the ratings. He said, I don't care whether anybody watches this show or not, because I can sell 2 infomercials at 30 minutes each and get almost 3 times the money for that time slot that I'm fucking getting from you. So Saturday morning, Sunday morning, whatever, I don't care. I care about my news. I care about my primetime adjacencies. And I care about my weekend sports, football, basketball, etc., that's coming from the network. I don't care if anybody watches my station on your time slot. I just want the money. And there you go. So, point being, I go back to the statement I made a few minutes ago. Somebody at the TV station or network that don't like the program can fuck you up real quick. What was the original question?
The original question about Jim Ross and Orange Cassidy. And Tony Khan, I guess.
Well, but the original about the ratings. Sometimes that's why I said the TV station, they don't care about the ratings, they care about the money. And secondly, they don't care about the ratings as much as they care about being right about the ratings. Or so there's room for interpretation in there. And besides that, like you said, if it's a fucking joke and it throws your whole TV show off just to have the 2 dogs fucking for 2 minutes on the side of the road and show it because people will stare at it, which is what Pockets is, 2 dogs fucking on the side of the road, it's not worth it. And JR was trying to, JR thought that at that point, I'm sure, that Tony Khan was going to try to grow the program instead of appeal to his base that he already had with the very things that runs everybody else off. The AEW fans would not quit watching the program if Pockets wasn't on it. But a lot of people who were wrestling fans who would have given it a chance were insulted by Pockets and things of that ilk and chose not to watch it.
Well, you know, Jim, a lot of people think Tony's a supporter of Orange Cassidy because he's a fan of him in the ring. A lot of people think it's because Tony believes he's a very intelligent wrestling person, as he put it. And others think it's because Tony's a fan of his manscaping.
Well, you know, the reason why that my little dog Pockets' manscaping is so good is because he doesn't need to manscape since he has no hair on his balls whatsoever or any other part of his body because he's prepubescent. But folks, our audience are grown men, many of them. Some of them are females, but even then, you need to keep these things neat. I'm not saying that you necessarily need to advertise if you're a woman that you're using a product called manscaping, but at the same time, they work. So do it in the privacy of your own home, folks. If you're grown people of all kinds and you got hair spurting out from all your orifices, our friends at Manscaped can help you out. And guess what they got going on now? The all-new Ultra Premium Collection. It's an all-in-one hygiene skin and hair bundle. It'll upgrade the everyday man's shower routine from head to toe, from testicle to tonsil. You deserve it. I'm telling you, they got you covered. Let me tell you what's in this new Ultra Premium Collection. Here's your routine. You lather on the cologne-infused Ultra Premium Body Wash with aloe vera and sea salt. It's cologne-infused body wash. That means that not only are you washing, but also you're putting some cologne on at the same time without having, you're saving steps here. And with the sea salt, you're going to be seasoned properly and good to the taste as soon as you come out of the shower. Now it's hair care time. You're going to apply the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. You're saving another step. You're shampooing and you're conditioning. It's a non-greasy formula with a base of coconut water, green tea, turmeric, and sage. My God.
Turmeric.
There's an R in it.
Oh, turmeric.
Turmeric. And sage. After you finish this stuff, you're going to hop right in the oven at the Kenny Rogers roaster, and you're going to taste delicious. And if you put this stuff on your armpits and down in your public region, I'm sorry, it's pubic, your pubic region, not public. You don't want to make that public.
Unless you're Ric Flair, then it's a public region.
Well, then it's a public reason. And then public reason. Yeah. And you drop in out of a helicopter. And then, folks, once you get out of the shower, you protect yourself further from this body odor. My God, you must stink like a man eating Fremunda cheese on the septic tank of a slaughterhouse, because you've got hit with the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner and the cologne-infused body wash, and now spray on the Manscaped aluminum-free deodorant. It's aluminum-free. That you do not want that nasty tin can smell when you're on a date, like a just-opened can of Dinty Moore pork and beans. No, this deodorant is aluminum-free, and it's cologne-infused. You notice a pattern emerging here. If you've got tattoos or dry skin, they got the hydrating body moisturizer spray. And the free gift in the ultra premium collection, the Manscaped lip balm. So whether you're kissing someone that's near and dear to your heart or preparing to kiss some ass to save your job, you got the lip balm. And last but not least, in comes the Lawnmower 4.0 to clear off any unwanted body hair. Actually, you should have used that before you got in the shower, and then you could wash all that stuff out, because the Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof. So it's a major part of this whole routine. I'm telling you what, folks, if you don't want to stink like just a disgusting sewer dweller, and if you don't want to have hair covering your body like some off-brand wolf man out of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, you got to get the Ultra Premium Collection and shave and wipe off that stink. Make yourself presentable, for heaven's sake. You know, we got a really classy audience out there, because this is a classy program. But wash your crotch every once in a while. Anyway, we're going to save you some money doing it. Go to manscaped.com and use the code DRIVE and get 20% off and free shipping. 20% off and free shipping, manscaped.com, code word DRIVE. Do it today. Your loved ones will thank you for it. Your children may pay attention to you. Your dog won't keep trying to hump your leg. You know, dogs eat shit, right? As a matter of fact, Bobby Eaton.
What?
Bobby Eaton used to say every time we'd see a dog, Corny, you better run. That's a shit-eating dog. So, if your dog is showing you a lot of affection, you probably stink. Manscaped.com/drive. Not drive, not don't slash it. Use the code DRIVE. That's what you need to do. Manscaped.com, code word DRIVE.
Well, Jim, we carry on here with the show, and our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Paul in Connecticut. Recently, Chris Jericho was asked why he turned down the chance to be an EVP when he joined AEW. Jericho said, quote, "Tony Khan's the boss. I knew that from the start. So I wasn't going to play grab ass and use EVP as an ego boost. Fuck that. Just give me more money." What are your thoughts on Jericho's response?
Well, honestly, that's a pretty level-headed response, because all the EVPs ended up doing more shit, right? But Jericho got more money and only has to wrestle and kibitz where he feels like it.
And so, you're only an EVP as long as Tony wants you to be an EVP.
Yeah. And again, so for less work and more money, that's what he didn't give a shit about being an EVP, because he didn't want to build all the company. He just wanted to build his part in it. I can't disagree with that statement. That's just, you know, that's actually just being honest for Jericho for once. He didn't want the grab ass egotistical whatever. He just wants to be able to put all the attention on himself without having to take the heat for being an EVP, putting all the attention on himself.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Chris K. Did the Midnight Express ever party at the Lighthouse Bar? I was in there one night, yeah. And Jim Duggan and Steve Williams cleaned the entire bar out.
In Alexandria, Louisiana.
That's what it says here, from Alexandria, Louisiana.
Okay, well, now that yes, well, the answer is I think Bobby may have gone there once or twice. I think because that's, because he said, Corny, I ain't going back in there. Dennis may have gone a time or two, but mostly the baby faces, Dr. Death, Duggan, and I think Hercules Hernandez, even though he was a heel, he was in there a time or two also with Pee Wee, but they didn't call it in Alexandria. They called it the Fight House instead of the Lighthouse because it was this, I drove by it once, right? No way I could have gone in there. I wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes. They'd have called the police. I'd have been killed. But it was this, not even a paved parking lot, just a gravel and mud parking lot with this giant, looked like a tin building that you would erect on a farm somewhere. And on any weekend night, and especially late, it would be just jam-packed with every drunken redneck and Cajun in central Louisiana, and they all wanted to fight the wrestlers. And if you wanted to fight, and the baby faces, if you wanted to fight Jim Duggan and Dr. Death Steve Williams, you had to be drunk, crazy, or both, and that's what would happen. I mean, who was it? One of the boys told me they went there one night, and they'd been there about 15 minutes, and they went to go to the bathroom, and as they got about 10 feet from the men's bathroom door, so it was one of the swinging doors where it opened both ways, right? As they got about 10 feet from the men's room door, the door busted open, and a guy flew out. The body is what had fucking bowed the door open and landed at his feet, and he looked up, and the guy that had thrown him was Hacksaw Duggan. He beeled him right out of the bathroom. So that was what Watts used to talk about in that territory. Louisiana, Oklahoma, some of those places the guys would get into just going chasing pussy. You were going to get in a fight. And if you got the shit kicked out of you in a bar in Alexandria, Louisiana, and you're supposed to be the Mid-South wrestling champion or a top guy or whatever, and everybody sees you get the shit kicked out of you by some drunk fucking goof, you're fired. The other option is don't go out in these places and get in the fight to begin with. If you don't get in the fight, you'll be fine. If you get in a fight, you better win, because if you lose, you're fired. Then that made sense.
I believe that's what happened to Bob Orton Jr. He got fired because was it either he lost a fight or he didn't have enough scrapes on his knuckles, so Watts said, you're fired.
Yeah, it was something like, look, you didn't even defend yourself? Fuck it, you're fired.
If Midnight Express went into a bar in Alexandria, Louisiana, got their ass kicked, how would it get back to Watts? Would it get back to Watts through Grizzly?
Yo, yeah. Well, again, it's not like you could keep that secret because there was no social media. There was no Twitter, blah, blah, blah. But if somebody had beat up Dr. Death in public, or Jim Duggan, or the Midnight Express, or anybody, the entire town would hear about it. And everybody knew who we were because we were on real television doing the highest ratings in the fucking town that everybody watched. And we just potentially, because a lot of the guys that would go to the Fight House in Alexandria, they lived in Baton Rouge. And so they'd stop by there and, but they just left. How far is that?
How far is that from Baton Rouge to Alexandria?
100 miles. They'd stop by there after the show. So they've just left a building where there were 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people watching them. And now they're over at the bar getting in a fight. And the girls knew where they were going, so they'd follow them. And then that's the thing. The guys would get mad because the girls were fawning all over the wrestlers, including their girlfriends. And so they would want to start trouble, and generally it didn't end well for the fan, but at the same time, here comes the cops and, blah, 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 bad publicity, whatever. But the girls would stir it, and then when they got the attention, well, now not only is my boyfriend jealous, but also this wrestler wants to fuck me, so I'm going to see how far I can stir this. And holy shit, that's when the problems really started. But they would, because then the girls had the rats, I should say, not just the average female walking the street in Alexandria or any of these towns, but the rats had their own hierarchy and their own pecking order, and they either wanted to get the top guys or elsewise they wanted to have a fight going on over them because then they could brag to their friends. Same as the guys would brag to their friends if the fucking wrestlers that they like hung out with them and drank beer. Except the girls wanted them to be fought over. So I never went in any of those fucking places. I got a pizza and had my pussy delivered to the hotel like all good boys.
All right, well, like all good boys, let's get another question here on the show. Jim, sometimes you end with in a certain way that just makes it impossible to start.
I'm bothering no one. You know, everybody's doing their own thing.
Did you ever think about asking the girl to bring the pizza?
You know that happened on a number of occasions. And in warm weather, sometimes they might bring it with a raincoat on with nothing underneath, but that's a different story for another day.
All right, well, let's continue on with the show. This next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from B. Barry. Hello,
B.
Jim.
Barry?
B. Barry. I'm listening to the Vince McMahon Omnibus again. And you mentioned the flight in which Vince is upset because he wants to get back to the office and get an extra half day of work. My question is, what work is getting done every day in these offices? When you were there, obviously. Is Vince in his office writing down ideas all day? Making a list of new names for wrestlers? Writing a list of words he hates? What exactly is happening there that couldn't be done remotely? Do people just spin around in their chairs awaiting Vince's beckoning call? It sounds like theirs and oh, I don't know what his last sentence was supposed to be, but it went off the rails, so I'll just give up. What is Vince doing all day? What is this hard work that he does more than everyone else?
Well, in all honesty, it's not he's just sitting down, I've got an idea for Raw next week. He's taking fucking phone calls from the network. He's taking phone calls from the pay-per-view people. He's giving orders to different departments to do all kinds of shit I can't even fucking enumerate here verbally, but he really did run the company, and everybody either needed to be on standby in case he needed to ask him a question. Vince would spend an inordinate amount of the time of the day if he would hear something. He'd say, "Get me so-and-so at the office." And they'd have to be there to answer the phone, and he'd ask them one question, and that would lead him to call somebody else. Let's call creative services. Let's get on that. But, I mean, he was fielding paperwork and contract updates, and it was still even 25 years ago, it was a big company with a couple of hundred employees, and it wasn't just the wrestling operation that Vince was concentrating on. He had all of us around to do that, but it was everything else. And working remotely, remember this is 1997, they had email, which I don't know that Vince completely trusted at that point because it was new.
Right.
I sent one email the whole time I worked in that office. I still had a typewriter and I made copies and fucking gave people memos on paper. There were cell phones. I still had a beeper at that point in case there was an emergency at home. So you didn't just work remotely then like you do now. If you weren't near a landline phone, you couldn't get goddamn, Bonnie Hammer from USA Network on immediately. And that's what he was doing. He was constantly fielding calls, signing papers, having meetings about anything from marketing to merchandising to open up new markets, etc., and running the whole freaking show. So yes, and there was all, if you wanted, now Vince, he may not necessarily have had to do everything he did. He could have had some other people do it, or it might not have all, but it was all important to him. And he was not only doing it from the time he'd get up back then in the old days. Now I guess he does his workouts at 3:00 in the morning. Back then, he was he was up at 5 or 6 or whatever before dawn and worked out in his home gym. And by the time we got there at 9 o'clock on a writing day on Wednesday, he'd already finished his breakfast and his workout, and he's ready to work. And if we got out of there at 6 o'clock that night, we considered ourselves lucky. Sometimes it was 7 or 8. Bruce Pritchard told me in the days of him and Pat, it used to be 10 and 11. And then whoever his victims were would leave the house, and then he'd get back on the phone, Vince, and start doing more shit. So it's, it just, the method of electronic transmission has changed and, modernized over the years. But Vince, there's always something that he can find to be busy. The work is never done, whether it's something he has to do, something he just wants to do, or something he feels like he should do that somebody else could do.
And the other thing is, it's all he wants to do. He doesn't want to go sit and watch TV or anything.
No. So, that's not any big shock, but that's what it was. It wasn't just, oh gosh, we got to work on Seg 7 for Raw Monday. It was, I'm going to open up fucking Brazil.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Rob in Connecticut.
A lot of people sending questions in from Connecticut this week.
Some of my favorite stories are about how tough the boys used to be. I've heard Jim tell stories about Harley Race, Dr. Death, Hercules Hernandez, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and the Island Boys, as Jim calls them, to name a handful. But I've never heard Jim talk about how tough Blackjack Mulligan was.
Huh.
I've heard Ric Flair mention in interviews that Mulligan had a habit of sucker punching people, including Harley Race and Andre the Giant. Does Jim know about either incident or any other stories involving acts of violence that may have been perpetrated by Blackjack Mulligan?
Yeah, who else was it? He beat the shit out of Buck Robley one night, didn't he?
He knocked out Ole twice, I think.
Out Ole. That's right, it was Ole he knocked out twice. And sucker, but just one time I think, weren't they walking up a hill or something somewhere, and Mulligan just turned around and just fucking blasted him. I didn't spend a lot of time around Blackjack Mulligan because his heyday was mostly right before I got in the business, and he was pretty much out of the ring by the time I went anywhere but Memphis, and he never worked Memphis. Having said that, I've obviously met him several times, and there was that time that when George Scott was hired by Jim Herd to be the booker for WCW for 3 months, January through April of 1989. For about 2 or 3 weeks, he brought in Blackjack Mulligan to be his assistant booker, specifically for this reason. As ridiculous as this sounds, not for the territories, but when they were working for Turner Broadcasting, this was under the TBS umbrella. Blackjack Mulligan was his assistant booker, so if anybody didn't want to do what George Scott told him to do, Mulligan would make them, physically. Now that may have worked in the 70s, but it wasn't going to work in almost 1990 in Turner Broadcasting. And Mulligan came in and was there. I remember him he gave us one of our finishes. I think was there a clash in, oh, God damn it, January or February of 90. But anyway, he was there for about 2 or 3 weeks and saw that the whole place was a clusterfuck and didn't really want to do his job or like it or fit in there and left. I don't know whether he was asked to leave or whether he left on his own or whether it was just simultaneous, and that was all you saw of Blackjack Mulligan. But that was the big deal when it came. Yeah, Mulligan's here. If anybody doesn't want to go for what George Scott wants to do, he's going to fucking make them. Well, no, because we've already established that since we're working for an actual real business, if he touches either one of us, we could sue Ted Turner and fucking retire. But as far as being a tough guy, I mean, if he's 6'9" and 350 pounds, that says something right there. Was Mulligan a high-level amateur wrestler of any kind? No, he played pro football at a lower level. I don't mean like semi-pro. I mean, he was in the NFL for a while. He wasn't a star. couple seasons, right? Bob Windham. He was a badass as far as being a big guy that was strong and heavy and could fucking put you where he wanted you to go and could hit hard. But also, as you mentioned, sometimes had the reputation of, well, you're not going to know he's going to hit you until he does because you don't know it's coming. So could he stretch anybody or could he out-wrestle Brock Lesnar? No, but because of his massive size and strength and disposition, he was somebody that nobody fucked with. If that makes any sense.
Jim, our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Eric in Rochester, Minnesota. I'm always fascinated to hear Jim speak of the behind-the-scenes aspects of wrestling. What can you tell us about how you became acquainted with the redneck racist motherfucker himself, Harold Varner? Did he have any other responsibilities besides the ring crew? Did you ever consider using him as an on-screen talent? A possible feud with D'Lo Brown? A Tim Horner heel turn with Harold as his manager and mouthpiece? Far be it for me to question the greatest manager and booker of all time, but you may have left money on the table with him. So, I guess it's a funny question here if you know who he's talking about. And I know who he's talking about because when I was at Smoky Mountain in 95, Harold Varner told me how he was running Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But Jim, Harold Varner, how did you become acquainted with him and who is he?
Oh, God damn it. Harold Varner was the guy that we got in the last little run of Smoky Mountain Wrestling to haul the fucking ring. And the reason we had to get him is because I've told the story before. The ring truck that Tim Horner had found for us and we had purchased, the used truck, it had gone through 2 engines and was broke down and needed a third, and we couldn't afford it. And some way or another, Harold Varner was a guy that lived over in West Knoxville that had a trailer and had been around the outlaw shows in East Tennessee enough where he knew how to put up a ring and take it down. And somehow one of the boys, I don't know, somebody, maybe one of the local guys, maybe Tony Anthony knew him, or somehow he was brought to our attention as somebody that could carry the fucking ring because we had no truck. Okay, so how we don't do background checks on, people hauling the ring, right? So he starts using his truck and trailer to haul our ring around and stuff for TV, whatever. And that's when D'Lo had come in and done a tryout at the behest of Chris Candido, who told me that I got this guy, he looks just like Ernie Ladd in New Jersey, and he's 300 pounds, and he can do all this, and you got to see him. Oh, bring him down. So I go in the locker room that day. I said, where's the guy that looks like Ernie Ladd? And I see D'Lo Brown, and he was 6 feet tall instead of 6'9", and he was 340 or so then because he was a fat young boy. And he didn't look anything like Ernie Ladd. But I said, well, let's let him work. And then he worked, and then I said, I don't care whether he looks like Ernie or not, but I like him. So he moved down, and he was going to be the Gangsta's posse / stooge guy. And to make him extra money, I asked him, it's not like I ordered him to. I said, well, you want to work on the ring crew? That way you can be at every town and get a payoff, and we will put you on the card, and you can work wherever possible. You'll get paid for that too, and you get some experience, but you'll be around. Yes, sir, because D'Lo was all in. He wanted to go. He wanted to be in the wrestling business. What I didn't know when I just made these arrangements that one would think would be satisfactory to everybody, old Harold Varner's 60-something years old easily then and needed help, and there's D'Lo's big, strong, can carry shit, wants to be in the wrestling business. I was not aware that what D'Lo told me shortly after, well, a while after, that Harold Varner was the biggest racist in the goddamn world and hated black people and would barely even talk to D'Lo Brown like a human being. And he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to D'Lo appear ungrateful, and he didn't know that Harold Varner was there simply because we had nobody else, and I didn't give a fuck whether Harold Varner lived, died, or caught on fire as long as he got the ring there. So finally it comes to a head when one night after a show at Freedom Hall in Johnson City, I get back because I lived in Morristown, and D-Lo was staying at the Smoky Mountain Flophouse, I think, in Morristown, but most of the guys lived in Knoxville. So I was a little bit farther. So I was home first, and I get a phone call from D-Lo, who's on the side of the road at a gas station payphone. Harold Varner has put him out of the way. He's got out of the truck on the side of Interstate 81 because they were driving back after D-Lo loaded the ring up, and they're driving back, and Harold Varner's talking to him like a dog. And he said, I'm just about sick and fed up with that. You're not going to talk to me that way. And Harold Varner said, well, it's my goddamn truck, and I'm talking to you any way I want to, boy. And he said, well, then let me out of this motherfucker. And Harold pulled over and let him out. And he's a black man in East Tennessee at 1 o'clock in the morning, walking down the side of Interstate 81, holding his fucking wrestling bag. I said, God damn it, I said, stay wherever you are, and we got somebody to go and pick him up. And that was his official exit of the ring crew. I said, I'll just put you on all the shows from now on and pay you as a wrestler, and hopefully one of these days we can get this truck fixed and get rid of this goddamn hillbilly nitwit. But otherwise, just stay away from him. And that's how D-Lo got on full-time as a wrestler and got points with everybody for telling Harold Varner to go fuck himself and shove his truck up his ass. I'd rather walk back from Johnson City.
One of the parts of this question that made me laugh was, did he have any other responsibilities besides the ring crew? And I mentioned at Fan Week in 95, I don't even remember how it came up, but he just started letting people know that he was behind the scenes of Smoky Mountain, one of the people in charge.
Yeah.
Did you know he was doing that stuff?
Not till afterwards, no. Yeah. What's he in charge of? Filling the fucking gas tank of the ring truck. That's what he's in charge of. And then we had to actually go and repossess the ring from him because I was going to sell it to somebody else. And he said, well, I want to buy it. I said, well, I've already made the deal. Well, I've got the ring. I said, well, it's my goddamn ring. So we took the cops to his house to repossess the fucking ring.
Well,
Harold Varner. If I'd only had a good lawyer back then.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
Boy, I tell you what, if I'd have found a lamp on the beach and rubbed it and a genie appeared, I wouldn't have got a wish granted quicker than that. Folks, Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. As I mentioned, he was a sponsor of the big event that Bobby Fulton's world-class professional big-time wrestling ran in Chillicothe over the weekend. They drew 3,000 people, a sellout, turned 500 away. Wow. And Stephen was an integral sponsor in charge of that. But also, remember we talked a while back, Brian, about the lawsuits that have been filed against Johnson & Johnson because there was asbestos in their talcum powder, in the baby powder. And now they've been found against, by the way, and now apparently they're trying to get out of paying these judgments that have been handed down against them by playing the bankruptcy court rules and et cetera that we've got in this country. But also, Stephen is anxious to take them down to the mat again because now it's been reported and found out that Johnson & Johnson, and this is an article, by the way, on the Daily Kos, dailykos.com, for those of you so inclined to look at it. Johnson & Johnson, a health product company that claims to believe good health is the foundation of vibrant lives, apparently didn't think that value system applied to those who were incarcerated more than 50 years ago. The unsealed documents show that Johnson & Johnson funded an experiment injecting dozens of mostly black prison inmates with asbestos. So the company had a point of comparison for the talc used in its baby powder. They knew 50 years ago. And they were not only they were experimenting on prisoners, injecting them with asbestos that has been found since then, since 50 years ago, to be a cancer-causing agent that was also in their baby powder, which obviously they were looking for a baseline. So anyway, if they had no idea about this asbestos issue, then one of the attorneys who got a $26 million judgment said, why else would they pay these people to inject asbestos into prisoners? They just picked it out of thin air. Hey, let's see about the asbestos. So Johnson & Johnson, their balls are in a vice. And they are now, as I said, they've rolled the baby powder product and associated litigation out of Johnson & Johnson and over to another company that they have created. And then 2 days after it was created, it filed for bankruptcy. And now Johnson & Johnson says they've been relieved of dealing with lawsuits over the powder because this other bankrupt company's in charge of them now. Wouldn't you know who won the pony? So Stephen P. New and crusaders such as him are going after these pricks, and they're going to bring them down again. And that's the kind of work that he can do for you too, folks. If you've been harmed or misrepresented or lied to or cheated or hornswoggled, flim-flammed, Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Baby powder or not, he'll shake them down for you.
That's right. And Jim, I do want to make a programming note mention here before we get to our last topic. We promised everyone a review of, or a watch-along of Roddy Piper versus Bret Hart from WrestleMania 8.
Sure did, and you forgot about that, didn't you?
Well, I also just thought we had a lot of things to go over today, so we're going to hold that back to either the experience or next week's drive-thru, so we haven't forgotten about it. It will happen within the next few shows. But Jim, a big story that unfortunately is unfolding as we are recording right now is the reports, and it's been reported by various members of the press as well as now friends and family, that Scott Hall is currently on life support. I believe the story is he suffered 3 heart attacks as part of a complication after a hip surgery.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does not appear that, as of recording time, it doesn't appear that they are expecting a good result here, but at a minimum, Jim, as we are recording, Scott Hall is on life support. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, Kevin Nash reported, he's not a journalist, but he posted, and obviously they've been friends for so long, but he posted that they're waiting for Scott's family to all assemble before taking him off life support, and that's not because he won't need it anymore, but just there's nothing else apparently they can do. That might change, so we don't know, but he had the heart attacks based on what I read from a blood clot breaking loose from his recent hip surgery, because I guess and I mean, this sounds like the cliche, 85-year-old woman living at home alone falls and breaks her hip, and that's the beginning of the end, right? But he fell and broke his hip a few weeks ago and had to have surgery on it. And that surgery led to the blood clot that led to breaking loose, led to the heart attacks, and et cetera. I mean, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing no matter how you look at it, but several people had mentioned that everybody that was close to Scott Hall 10 years ago when they did that, was it ESPN did the documentary? They thought he was going to die pretty soon then because of the condition he was in. And a lot of people were saying, okay, this is not going to end well. And I guess one of the articles I read said his son Cody was in that documentary saying, hey, I just I just want to see my dad get better and etc. And I guess through numerous twists and turns, he's been in and out of a lot of rehabs and the thing with Dallas Page. But finally, I don't know. He's not in my social circle, but I guess over the last few years, he has straightened up somewhat. But now the health issues that he's been saddled with as a result of the life he led for years before that has just started taking its toll on him. But I have not heard that he's had major issues recently, or have you?
I had not heard too much about his health recently, no.
Yeah, so I think it's, issues with his, addiction issues.
Right.
That, I think he's,
yeah.
It's not like that this is something that's ongoing. It's just that now all those years of wrestling, all those years of steroids, all those years of the recreational drugs that he's, admitted to. And what was it he said on one of the shows that he and Michaels used to sit there and say, hey, are you still alive? Give me another pill. So this is all, coming to bear at all the same time on him. He's only 63. And, he looks a lot older because of everything he's been through. But, it's a shame. He was a pivotal part in wrestling history with the Attitude Era when he and Nash went to WCW. And I know they like to say they changed wrestling for, the way guys are paid and did it. No, they changed it all right, specifically for themselves. And if other people benefited, that was a byproduct. But they really changed the business because that's what kicked off the Attitude Era and Vince's response and the whole, 9 yards. And it was, of course, it was hot-shotted, and it was the Attitude Era didn't have to end when it did. It was just, it was hot-shotted so much by the people that didn't know what had started it. Shitstain, he thought that his writing did it, and Vince thought that his attitude had done it. They gave the people something that they believed for the first time in the 90s, at least in wrestling. At the start of the 90s, WWF was cartoon land. WCW was a non-entity. It was a great product that nobody was watching because the company was so mismanaged. And then they fell in a hole, and Vince had everything unobstructed for 6 years. And then Hall and Nash show up. First Hall, then Nash show up on WCW television. And because it was only the infancy of the internet, and people weren't as smart, and they didn't know everything that was going on, especially ahead of time, they thought that finally these two companies are going to fight. The WWF guys have invaded WCW. Shit's on. That's what kicked that off. And it was Hall and Nash because they could talk, because they looked good, because they were big, because they were fearsome and heels, and they didn't give a shit whether anybody liked them or not. That's what made that. And that's why Hogan wanted to become part of it, because he wanted to sap the over off of what Hall and Nash had started. He saw how hot it was going to be. But an invasion that wasn't really an invasion, but that was the first thing in wrestling that entire decade that the fans had been able to believe. And since they were able to come right straight hot off television, off Vince's television, with no warning, no burials, no nothing, it made it look like it was an invasion. And that's what kicked off the Attitude Era. So you can't take that away from either Hall or Nash. And Scott Hall, honestly, was probably the best worker of the original bunch. Helmsley was still green. Nash never was a great worker physically in the ring. Michaels was obviously a preeminent worker, but, Hall had it. He was more of and even JR said, hey, he's got a great wrestling mind. I think Hall was one of those guys where he kind of became who he was hanging around with. of all of those guys, I probably had the longer conversations with Scott Hall and still didn't have very many because we were always in different social circles. But Hall got the wrestling business and had the ability to work and still had size and could talk. And he got the Razor Ramon gimmick over. It was one of Vince's. Vince saw Scarface, and Vince had him watch the first year of Razor Ramon, had him tricked out like a complete gimmick. But Hall was smart enough and took enough of it into himself that he was able to make that gimmick something rather than just like the Tony D'Angelo thing now and just a complete parody of an Italian or a Cuban or whatever. He made so much of it himself that then when he had to drop it, there was a lawsuit over, him trying to be, or him being Razor Ramon when he was Scott Hall, but it was so much of it was him. It was his mannerisms. And they had to start writing down what things he could and couldn't say as Scott Hall to not be Razor Ramon. It was that because he did what you do. You take a gimmick and you make it you as much as you can. So then when he dropped it and became Scott Hall in WCW, he could still say a lot of the same and the toothpick and the whole 9 yards. It looked like him anyway. But do you remember, Brian, the American Starship?
That was him and Dan Spivey. What was it? Coyote and
Eagle.
Coyote and Eagle.
And I'm trying to think which was which. I think was Scott Hall Coyote. I think he was.
Yeah, he looks more like a coyote.
Dusty had them under a personal services contract. Did you know that?
I don't think I did.
That was the story, at least that I heard when we first started working for Crockett. That's when Spivey and Scott Hall were there as the American Starship. And Dusty had found both of them, I believe, in Florida and brought them up there. And he thought that they would be, because of their height and their size. And back of Scott Hall was a great looking guy. He looked like another guy that looked like Tom Selleck. And Spivey back then didn't look as bad as he would later, but they were big and they were impressive looking. And Dusty thought that they would be a modern, day super babyface tag team, American Starship, Eagle and Coyote. You can tell that was his name. That was Dusty's gimmick. The American Starship, baby. You can hear him saying it. And he wanted to push him, but Hall was green. Spivey was Spivey. And it was an underneath kind of team. He didn't push him to the moon. And I remember, I don't even know if at that point, if we ever worked with him as a team, or we worked with Spivey a couple times. I think Hall left first and went to work for Vern. And Spivey was hanging around, so we'd work against the Italian Stallion and Starship Eagle or whatever. And just, but that Dusty had them under contract and intended to do something with them because he saw something in them. You could see it with Hall even then. And then when he went in the AWA, because they had, let's face it, by that point, a smaller talent roster, less top guys, less veterans, etc. There was more room for him to grow there. What was the gimmick they brought him into WCW in was it 90 or 91? Was it right before I left or right after I left?
Well, he came in 89, the summer of 89, as an alligator hunter of some sort. And then he came back in 91 as the Diamond Stud.
That's the Diamond Stud. Yeah, I remember the alligator hunter briefly. That may have been, was that right after they got rid of George Scott and had the booking committee and everybody was throwing ideas in? Yeah, and that didn't last very long and it shouldn't have. I don't think, because
he's in the Battle Royal for Great American Bash 89, the pay-per-view.
Yeah. And then the Diamond Stud was affiliated with Diamond Dallas Page, and that was kind of a precursor to Razor Ramon, at least with the hair curl or whatever. But he really never got, he was getting experience at that point, but he really never got both a spot and a gimmick and a push at the same time until, a gimmick that was worth anything, until Razor Ramon. And then he took it and ran with it. And then the Outsiders. And at that point, really think about this. After that initial run and then whatever they did to clean up the mess after Vince bought WCW, did Scott ever have another really regular run after that? Or was it just coming back every so often as the NWO revivals and things like that?
I think it's kind of that. I mean, even that, when they first did that, when they brought Hogan back to wrestle Rock, and remember, they gave Scott Hall to Steve Austin because Steve Austin didn't want to wrestle Hogan.
Yeah.
I don't think Scott Hall lasted too much longer after that. Kevin Nash, I think, stayed, and Scott Hall was gone.
But think about it, 20 years ago, he was 43 20 years ago. Because we forget that he started late. He was in his late 20s when he broke into business, right? Because he's 3 years older than me and he started after. So, you know, that was pretty much his window to be a full-time guy. But as a result of the over of Hall and Nash and the NWO and the whole 9 yards, he's been able to go back and forth and do the reunions and et cetera off of that since then. But like I said, you know, I never had a long conversation with the guy because I was either never around him or then by the time I was, we were always in different social circles. Think about, you know, obviously just early on in the 80s, hey, how are you? Pass in the night. By the time that I went to the WWF, he was in WCW, it was just in and out. And then came in 91, I was already gone. 93, I went in, he was Razor. Cool. Yeah, we worked some with Yoko, blah, 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 whatever, as I recall. But then, because I was only going in and out for the TVs and the pay-per-views and running Smoky Mountain. But by the time I started spending more time up there, the clique was together. And Hall and Nash and whoever was in their car were always fucking with all my friends. Tammys and Candidos and the regular normal guys. And so it wasn't adversarial necessarily. And then the curtain call, and then I just, you know, I wrote all of them off as people that I would ever want to be friends with. But, you know, at the same time, he's a big name talent that, you know, got over to a level and was involved got over to a level that most people don't and was involved in the single biggest turning point in modern wrestling history. So out of all of them, he's probably the nicest guy. Like I said, I think he just took on the personality of those people that was around him. But, you know, I wish now maybe we had a talk or two, that if he hadn't done the curtain call and hadn't pissed all my friends off and shit in their lunch boxes or whatever, we might have been friends.
Certainly a very talented guy and one of the better big guys of his era, because he wasn't, you know, he was a big guy. He was what, 6'5", 6'6"?
Yeah. And see, that's the thing, because he's tall and his body's proportionate. A guy like that's, you know, 6'6" and weighs 270 sometimes doesn't look as big as he is on TV until you get up next to him. And he could move for a fucking guy that size. And, you know, who was it? Jesus Christ. Somebody just tweeted this. Somebody's was doing his Razor's Edge, but did it as turned it into a power bomb and dropped this guy right on the back of his head. And you saw his head bounce off the canvas. And Lance Storm had tweeted saying, well, that's a concussion. And other people, well, you didn't have any problem with Razor Ramon doing it. And I tweeted back, I said, well, look at the difference. You fucking idiots. Ramon, he knew how to pick a guy up and set him down. That's what I'm saying. Everybody else just imitates other people's moves. Hall knew how to work. Therefore, he could do some of these things. And, you know, I don't remember any problems with him hurting anybody. And I don't remember actually any problems with him having any major injuries either. It was always the substances that were Scott's own worst enemy. And for an athlete like that, maybe this is a caution. A guy that was in that kind of shape, that looked like that was a high-level athlete for a long period of time, and look at the the shape he's been in for the last 10 years or more and what's going on now. You know, that's something that maybe a lot of other people, maybe not in the wrestling business these days, they're addicted to video games now, but just people in life. If it can do that to him, what's it doing to you? And you look like a schlub to begin with.
Well, by gum, the drive-thru has closed. All right. Of course, we'll be with you this weekend on the Jim Cornette Experience, wherever you find your favorite podcast, and back at you next week here on the Drive-Thru. Once again, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Get access to the archive going back to the beginning in 2013. Patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to this incredibly rich archive. Patreon.com/Cornette. Want to remind you once again, subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. Subscribe today. Get access to full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, all with the very popular Travis Heckel artwork. Don't forget, we are now on the road to 250 million views. Be number 250 million today. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel.
And see what happens.
You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget about the Featherbottom's #1 priority, Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com.
And I have just gotten word that everything that was handed off to the Featherbottoms yesterday went in the mail this morning, which means that over 100 figures that just went on sale last Saturday are currently winging their way to the customers. What service?
At JimCornette.com. Of course, if the service sucks, you should call the man who sponsors the Drive-Thru, Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. And of course, as many of you in the wrestling business have found out, a very good friend to have on your side, a man who can help you out of a number of situations, especially with these pesky contracts. Stephen P. New. Well, I think that's it. Until next week on the Drive-Thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!